It's 3 minutes after 10 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Would you like a little... I'm terribly sorry. I think we're going to have to interrupt this programme because Nigel Farage is due to make an emergency address about the conviction of the ex-DUP leader Jeffrey Donaldson on 18 child sexual offence. Oh no, I'm terribly sorry. He's white. So we won't be getting that emergency address after all. I've just a little bit of a snafu there in the communications here at LBC Towers. I don't imagine he will mention it at all, but for people who care about such things, a former leader of the Democratic Unionist Party, who of course propped up Theresa May's government and subsequently went into a sort of Falmouth pact with whatever Farage's party was called at the time, showed no visible emotion yesterday after a jury at Newry Crown Court convicted him of rape, indecent assault and gross indecency against two victims between 1985 and 2008. I mean, one never wants to see riots or civil disobedience on our streets, ever, actually. Not in the current political climate. I suppose that if the fascists were in charge, then many people would feel they had little choice but to take up their cudgels. But to riot over crimes that had absolutely nothing to do with the people that you're trying to hurt, and to say nothing or have nothing to contribute to a conversation about one of the most senior politicians in the north of Ireland being a paedophile rapist just seems a little strange and illustrative perhaps of a deeper, darker truth. But anyway, as I said, no emergency address from Nigel Farage directly going against the wishes of any of the victims' families, because on this occasion the rapist, the paedophile rapist no less, is a very right-wing elderly white man. Two-tier outrage, perhaps. 5 minutes after 10 is the time. Can I tell you a secret? Are you interested in a little glimpse of what goes on in the murky depths of my mind? I'd like to do a phone-in towards the end of the show today that is linked to the heat. But I've just got this fond memory of once having a brilliant phone-in about what the worst job is to do when things are getting this hot. Do you remember that, Keith? We did, didn't we? We did, but it only happened once. It was like lightning striking once. And I think the winner was a bloke in a bell suit. Is that what they're called? Like, not a wetsuit, but a sort of diving suit, but the big ones. And he was welding something underwater. I mean, my memory's not what it was. He was welding... Because the obvious answer, I think, is insulating roofs. If you're in an attic today, putting down insulation... Do you know that there are laws governing the temperatures at which cattle can be transported by roads, but there are no laws governing the temperature in the classroom that your children may be compelled to attend today? Many schools, of course, are closing, but I'm just giving you a heads up on that because I really want to have a crack at it towards the end of the programme. Something linked to the heat. But I've got a feeling it only really worked once, that top. Or maybe it wasn't hot enough all the other times we did it. Maybe it needs to be really, really hot for me to get you to focus your mind on the question of how hot it is. I'm going to pepper today's programme because it is a wonderful day. Keith, do we have any rousing music? Perhaps the Ode to Joy. That seems to be topical at the moment. Do you know the bloke that was playing the Ode to Joy yesterday, Steve Bray, blamed it on me? Listen, I try not to be too self-referential. I don't often succeed, but I do try. I get blamed for everything in this country. I get blamed for Brexit being bad. I get blamed for the music playing out in Downing Street yesterday. Well, Keir Starmer, he literally blamed it on me by name. Eleanor couldn't wait to tell me when I got into work this morning, all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, getting ready to sit down with Michel Barnier, former French Prime Minister and Brexit negotiator, for a quick chat. I invited him to my Brexit party. He's the only one that turned up. And that was because he didn't understand the invitation. I don't know where all the parties are. I thought we would be having street parties today. I thought the breakfast show would be sort of broadcasting live from Sunderland or something like that. Where's all the celebrations for Brexit now that we can all agree that it's all going so brilliantly? Absolutely nothing. Damp squibs galore. So I'm going to pepper today's programme with some of the best calls I took in the years immediately after Brexit, because someone's got to celebrate, right? Someone's got to have a party. Where's Jamie Vardy when you need him? And I've only got 5 on my list. Eleanor's not very pleased with me for suggesting that we may not have the best ones on our list. They may be the best ones. I can't remember what was going on in 2016 any more than you can. But if you've got any special requests for the classic call to this programme from some furiously hard-of-thinking Brexit supporter, because the poor souls don't ring me anymore. I miss you guys. We should get the band back together. Seriously, ring me up, tell me about all those laws that you can't wait not to have to obey anymore. Tell me about all the exciting improvements to your life. Just give me why don't you ring any? You never write, you never phone. Oh, shush. Anyway, if you've got a particular favourite that you'd like to nominate, then you can do so by texting 84850 or WhatsApping 03456060973. It would help if you could give us a date, but that's probably quite a big ask. We should be able to find it, shouldn't we? Just with a few details, like the thing that you remember most about it. 03456... No, hang on. That's the WhatsApp, anyway. That's the WhatsApp. A few people claiming they can beat the loft insulation guys if we were to turn our attention later to the programme to the question of who's got the worst job today. So I'm not doing that thing where I am reluctant to talk about what I've decided we have to talk about in the first hour of the programme, so I go around the houses before I actually get there. The weirdest thing, or one of the weirdest things about this job always will be, the fact that I get excited about the news. Even when it's news that in my unprofessional life, in my civilian life, in my family life, I find very dispiriting. Even on days like this, 10 years ago, when the referendum result was in or imminent, I couldn't wait to get to work to talk to you. If somebody obviously terrible becomes Prime Minister, like Boris Johnson, I can't wait to get to work. I know this is crushingly disappointing for anybody who sort of messages me on mornings like that to say, ha, 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 I'm drinking your salty tears. But and yes, you know, I'll be very sad off air. Of course I will. But on air, there are no better days than days when the news is big and the news is juicy. And that is what we do together. I think in some ways, those are the most memorable times that we spend together. And this is one of those times. I'm not entirely sure that it feels like it at the moment. I'm not entirely sure that it feels like a momentous moment in UK political history, and yet it is. Someone told me a story yesterday. I can't tell you where I was yesterday because you wouldn't believe me, but somebody told me a story yesterday about, and I've forgotten it, unfortunately. It was about the number of prime ministers we had before the invention of the smartphone versus the number of prime ministers we have had after the invention of the smartphone. The problem is I can't remember what the starting line was. Do you see what I mean? I can't remember where you count from. But you can, there is an extraordinary gulf between the number of years prior to us having smartphones and the number of prime ministers we had in that period and the number of prime ministers that we had after the invention of the smartphone. And it did sort of occur to me that perhaps we are becoming fatigued with the flux. We have, and I have to be careful how I say this, I certainly have to make sure I've got my teeth in, we are all perhaps suffering from flux fatigue. My first band was, no, stop it. Flux fatigue, i.e. what feels extraordinary when it happens very rarely does not feel extraordinary when it happens very often. I mean, there's an ineluctable logic to that, isn't there? There's an utter inevitability to that, even if it's like a volcano erupting. If it erupts every other Tuesday, it's going to be a lot less momentous than if it erupts once every 100 years. So we established yesterday that, Ted Heath was the last Prime Minister to both enter and leave Downing Street as a consequence of a general election. And that's mad, because he entered Downing Street in 1970 and left in 1974. Every Prime Minister subsequently has either arrived as a consequence of an internal battle or a transition of power, or left as a consequence of an internal battle or a transition of power. I don't even think we've got any deaths on that list, have we, of prime ministers that passed away in office? Not since 1970, obviously. So they have either resigned, as Keir Starmer did yesterday, or they have always resigned, or they entered as a consequence of their predecessor's resignation. So you might have thought John Major was on that list, but he's not, because John Major entered Downing Street as a consequence of Margaret Thatcher's resignation. He then went on to both win and lose a general election, but that's not the measure, that's not the metric. The metric is, very simply, that he both entered, or she both entered and left Downing Street as a consequence of a general election. And it put me off my stride a bit yesterday when we worked that out, because it sort of made me think, well, perhaps things aren't that extraordinary, but of course they are, because of that other little nugget that I shared with you, the idea that if you were born on the right day in 1979, you could reach your 11th birthday having only known one prime minister. Whereas if you were born on the right day in 2006, you could reach your 11th birthday having known 7 by the time Burnham takes up, or whoever, because that's actually the first phone-in we're going to have, although you'd have done very well to have worked that out for yourself so far. It's not as if it's 10:15 already or anything, and I haven't even told you what the phone-in is. That would be absolutely remiss and profoundly unprofessional. And that's the point, is that, yes, OK, the door may revolve, but it revolves incredibly slowly. Prime ministers may be replaced at the whim of their own party as opposed to the electorate, but it happens prior to 2016, certainly prior to 2019. It happens quite rarely. It is a moment. It is, if you like, a man bites dog moment of politics. And I just wonder whether it is becoming a little bit dog bites man. That's not the phone. Well, I don't think that's the phone in. It's just not extraordinary anymore. It's not remarkable. I watch political journalists almost craving it, responding to it almost like a fix to which they have become addicted during the Brexit years, which I suppose technically we're still in, although the kind of people that used to use the phrase Trump derangement syndrome, thinking that it was funny and clever, are probably still insisting that we shouldn't be talking about Brexit anymore, even though it's the most significant reason, I think, for almost all of our ills, and the ones that it didn't cause, it certainly made worse, as any fool know. But you have to reflect upon the amount of time that passed between prime ministers, not upon the fact that being removed is almost always, or more often than not, is a consequence of resignation rather than electoral defeat. It's the speed with which the door revolves now. It's the speed with which the door revolves that I find dispiriting, and with which I think I may have become fatigued. I don't think it's Andy Burnham's fault that I'm not feeling that frisson of engagement that I would expect to feel on a morning like this. Coming on air the day after a prime ministerial resignation, having a look, running the rule over what is likely to happen next. That's really exciting, usually. It's really exciting, usually. Is it because we're all a bit hot? Is it because the football's on? Is it because we were kind of expecting last week on people who actually bother putting together programmes ahead of schedule, which, to be honest, isn't our greatest strength on this programme, but we did today. We got some calls ready. We thought we'd be talking about Brexit. I sat down for a croissant with Michel Barnier earlier and had a fascinating... What a dignified man he is. I wonder what our equivalent would be. Hard to think, really. Is it just me, or do you have a touch of flux fatigue as well? Anyway, the question is this. I tried to ask you this yesterday, but I don't really think you were in the mood. The simple question, really, of whether or not or what you want. The idea of Burnham being installed without challenge. There's not going to be a general election. Fair play, everybody can call for one. Everybody else called for one when Johnson was handing over to Truss and when Truss was handing over to Sunak. It's what you do. When the other lot resign, you call for a general election, but no one ever calls one. No one ever really expects one. No one did it. Gordon Brown didn't do it, and he probably should have done. Liz Truss didn't do it, and she almost certainly wouldn't have done, even if she'd lasted more than 5 minutes. So we hand over power, a succession, a peaceful passage of power. And this is a question of national interest. So I want you to take your scarf off, all right? I don't think that if you're going to answer this question in the style of a Badenoch or a Farage, I don't think it's very interesting to anybody. Because, of course, you were not clamouring for general elections when it was your lot that were just essentially handing over the car keys to somebody else, whether there'd been a leadership battle or not. We mentioned it. May gave the keys to Johnson, who didn't call an election. Johnson gave the keys to Truss, who didn't call an election. Truss gave the keys to Sunak, who didn't call an election. And Starmer is giving the keys to either Burnham or somebody else without calling an election. So you see what I mean about footballification. If you take your scarf off, you can see that all very, very clearly, and you can state it. There will be tweets galore from Labour figures demanding that there's a general election when Truss took over from Johnson or when Sunak took over from Truss. But they all know it's not going to happen. And to be honest, I think it's probably poor journalism to pretend that you don't understand that. Everybody, and I'm not going to patronise you or condescend by pretending that I don't understand that, or indeed that you're too stupid to understand it yourself. I will leave the belief that you're stupid to people like Mr. Farage. What do you want? And this is a really important question. This is where my flux fatigue will be abating, because you will say something thoughtful and intelligent to me, and it will get my little grey cells whirring, and I will start thinking about it in a way that reminds me why I find these moments exciting. Do you see what I mean? So in a way, after all the years that I've come to your rescue at 10 o'clock in the morning and managed to invest you and inject you with a frisson of excitement at the current affairs smorgasbord being laid out before us, today I'm asking you in a way to do it for me, to make this question really, really interesting, because it is important, and what is important should be interesting. And when the important is not interesting, it's the fault of the observer. It's my fault that I'm not more excited by this question. And I want you to both be excited by it, and I want you, and please don't clip this up inappropriately, I want you to excite me. It feels wrong. Something about it feels, at this point in proceedings, a bit wrong. The idea that Andy Burnham becomes Prime Minister unchallenged, despite not even having been in Parliament until 2 o'clock, 2:30 yesterday. Something about that feels a bit rum to me. I could be wrong, but I'm being honest. And as I read about the possibility of some senior figures throwing their hat into the ring, I find myself, and forgive me for this because I'm not even joking, I find myself 48% thinking I wish they would. I hope they do. I would like to see some sort of contest, because I would like to see the stalls set out. And even if Burnham were to romp home, I would then have a little bit more knowledge of some of the other players in his party, some of the other runners and riders about whom I don't currently know an awful lot, like, for example, Darren Jones, who I understand has not ruled out a challenge, like, for example, Al Carnes, who is, it is reported this morning, weighing up whether to run. I wouldn't mind seeing Angela Rayner have a crack, but I think that's probably unlikely. As you know, I'm a big admirer of Dan Jarvis. So 0345 6060 973 is the number you need to tell me. And remember, there's an argument for saying, no, God, no, 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 let's have a coronation. The last thing we need is to air our dirty laundry in public or to invite into knee-sign warfare. So what is your reason for wanting or not wanting a coronation? Coronation or contest? 0345 6060 973. And because my introduction has been a little bit round the houses, I can state with some confidence that if you hit the numbers now, you will get through.
James O'Brien on LBC.
24 is the time. Peter Murrell, the estranged husband of Nicola Sturgeon, jailed this morning for 5 years and 3 months for embezzlement. The Cabinet in Westminster meeting for the first time since the Prime Minister quit. Andy Burnham clearly poised to run for leader in the coming days. But will anybody run against him? And what do you want and why? Do you want a coronation or do you want a contest? And I think that there are compelling reasons for wanting both. And I also think that my own opinion is probably yours for the taking, if you can persuade me of your position by 11 o'clock today. But at the moment, I'm 52-48 in favour of a contest. I find myself thinking, I don't know, just a sort of sense of discombobulation at the idea of an untrammelled passage from the mayoralty of Manchester to the prime ministership of the United Kingdom without really troubling the parliamentary scorers. I know he won in Makerfield, but he won in Makerfield last week. The general election was 2 years ago and he wasn't even in it. I don't know. As I say, 52-48. I don't know why that number's in my mind today, but we will be celebrating Brexit, I promise, because no one else is. I don't understand. Why aren't they all having parties? Why isn't Nigel getting the party poppers out? It's just bizarre. I thought they'd be doing laps of honour around Westminster, reminding us all of the benefits that they've accrued and all the things they promised us that they have now delivered. So it falls to me to run the party. Keith, can we get some sound effects? Maybe some party poppers? Or just some sort of rousing music? Maybe some Morris dancing type music. That would be appropriate. But not yet, because Josephine's in Westminster to kick off this conversation. Josephine, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. So in any other situation, I would agree that we need to have a long debate about the ideas. But I think the situation is so grave, with the right really trying to bring down this Labour government, that I think we need an immediate coronation. We need to get Andy in there, ideally as soon as next week, and just hit the ground running and essentially make up for the mistakes that Keir Starmer made and just go for it. Leverson to absolutely just be bold and make the changes that are needed in order to basically save this Labour government and the country from a reform government in the future.
Yeah, we just
have to get on with it. I don't think there's time to mess about.
Do you not want him to convince you that he can? Or perhaps you're already convinced, of course.
I am, well, I need proof from I've heard him speak and I think he's great. I think he's got what it takes. And I think Wes Streeting has what it takes. And the fact that Wes has also fallen in line behind him, I think speaks very highly of him. And he also seems to have very credible economic advisors around him. So I think he's got the right people around him. And I guess I'm kind of relying on them also to steer him in the right direction. And I just don't think there's any time for messing about. I think the right will exploit any weakness, any time that's taken.
I like that. I know that's a really strong argument. A proper sense of urgency
needs to be done, and he just has to get in and get on with it.
This is the perfect antidote to flux fatigue, isn't it? In that you are communicating a genuine sense of urgency, and I worry sometimes that those of us who pontificate professionally can get a little bit lazy in our thinking and sort of forget that we're talking about the fate of a country as opposed to a news story, as opposed to a topic for a phone-in show. Yes, you clearly do.
I feel so passionately that this country has a chance and that we really can make a difference and make a change to people's lives. And I feel like Andy knows, he has young children as well. And I think he also has that visceral sense of urgency and need to make a change. And whether that's electoral reform, I think he's been discussing that. But we really need bold changes, move much closer to Europe, eventually rejoin Europe. We know what has to be done. And, we really need to start just absolutely getting on with it and thinking about the future in terms of AI, how our economy deals with that, how we navigate this path between the US and China. There are so many issues that we need to tackle, and we're just wasting time yet again with pointless political debate.
Because the priorities are clear and what they want is urgent. I like your... Well, there goes my pendulum. I don't know how long it'll stay swinging in that direction. One little problem and it doesn't matter that he hasn't provided a long list of what he's going to do differently from Starmer, because Starmer's great flaw, his hamartia in many ways, was perception. It was how he conducted himself, and that's desperately unfair, but that's the world in which we live. I'm reminded, I think it was Harold Wilson, this might be apocryphal, but when television became a major player in politics, which is within living memory, incredibly, we're talking about smartphones a minute ago. So Harold Wilson would be delivering a speech at the Worksop Working Men's Club or something like that, and the cameras would be there, and everything I think was live in those days. And the camera, and he'd break off in the middle of the speech to deliver a prepared paragraph for the news, for the news. And when he did that, he'd clamp his pipe in his mouth. I remember reading when I was studying for my A-level, because that was the image that he sought to project to the viewers. And that's optics, that's spin. And unfortunately for Starmer, and it is horribly unfair, but it's also true, Andy Burnham could turn up with exactly the same agenda and just do a better job of selling it. And I think many people would be relieved. Although, like Josephine, I'd rather he did a little more than that. Here's Dominic Ellis with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
33 is the time. Coronation or contest? I don't normally like phone-ins that lend themselves to pithy little one-liners, but cometh the hour, cometh the man. And speaking of pithy little one-liners, I can feel my flux fatigue dissipating as we speak. I knew this would happen. Maybe it's because I'm responding to the heat a little bit. Or the thunder. I don't know how you slept last night, but the thunder was incredible. Our little dog. Oh, dear. Our little dog was in pieces. Have you ever had a small dog shake with fear? It's spasmodic, the right word. I know we use spasmodic to describe the passage of time, but it was like, they were like spasms the poor little thing was having. Unfortunately, the place that the little dog decided was safest in the house during the thunderstorm last night was on my head. Literally on my head. So, imagine my head on a pillow, if you dare, and then imagine the dog sitting on the bit of the pillow that was not covered by my head, but above my head, even though I was lying down. You see what I mean? So that's where the dog settled last night. Never done it before. Hopefully we'll never do it again. A mark perhaps of how serious that thunderstorm was. So maybe my flux fatigue was down to just genuine fatigue, because I spent most of last night with a dog on my head. There's something else I'd rather you didn't clip out of context. 10:34 is the time. Sue is in Glossop. Sue, what would you like to say?
Good morning.
Hello, Sue.
So, my theory is, and I do understand why people feel like there should be a bit more of a process to his inevitable entry as Prime Minister. But I think it's possibly a bit of a north-south thing. I think if you ask people in the north what they felt about it, they would probably say, just get him in, because we know the man fairly well.
Do you feel that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't even live in Manchester. I'm just on the outskirts.
Yes, no, I know Glossop. I used to live in Birch Vale.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, many years ago.
God.
Yeah, I know. Small world, isn't it? A tiny little place, Birch Vale.
Small world.
Tiny little place.
Birch Vale is tiny. Glossop's quite big now.
I know it is.
Obviously not in terms of the south.
Of course.
It's fairly big,
Yes.
it's a pretty big town. They're building constantly. Anyway, off topic. So, I suspect that you might get a different response in the north to that question, because we know him. We know what he's done for Manchester. He's been very, very good for Manchester. We know him to be decent and honest. I'm not saying that Keir Starmer wasn't these things. I feel badly.
No, but that ship has sailed, and we can worry forever about what was fair and what was not fair. But the ship has sailed, and we have to look at the waters ahead of us. I had a funny thought yesterday. I was talking about this on the Quiet Riot podcast, which I heartily recommend to people who enjoy this show. I think they'd enjoy that podcast. And I was chatting about, unexpectedly, I was booked for it before we knew Starmer was going to resign on the Monday. But I'm thinking about change soon, and I think that I personally have changed enormously over the course of the last 10 years as a consequence of all manner of things, most importantly probably being a parent to teenagers and having quite a lot of therapy. And there'll be a lot of people who have not had that personal exposure to Andy Burnham, as you point out, a north-south thing, who probably want to believe that Andy Burnham has changed a lot since he lost leadership elections to both Ed Miliband and shortly afterwards Jeremy Corbyn.
But he's done a sterling job in Manchester. He really, really has. And
what do you think he's learned?
I don't know. I don't know what he's learned. I don't know. I just think he's shown himself to be, in a very public office, to be a very decent, honest, hard-working human being. We know him to be that because we see him doing it all the time. What was going on in his political life before all of that, I can't really comment on because, he was never on my radar.
Yes.
But I know him as Mayor of Greater Manchester, and I know that he's done a good job. Also, he did amazing work for the Hillsborough families.
Yes, that's true.
He's done good work in his time in public office. I know that was when he was an MP, it wasn't when he was mayor, but he's done incredible things, and I think that he's a good human being, and I think because we're familiar with him, and we know him and we know what he's like. My husband has met him several times in the course of his work, not that he does anything spectacular, but and he says he's a decent bloke. And
he engenders confidence in people in a way that, I mean, 2020 hindsight is a wonderful thing, but it's hard to imagine anybody being a really passionate member of the Keir Starmer fan club or the Keir Starmer.
No,
I know some people have become that way subsequently because they respond emotionally to an underdog getting a kicking, and that's a nice response. It's a human, it's an empathetic response. Yeah. But it would be hard to sort of dance around a maypole.
Talking about Keir Starmer the other day, and we were saying he's like the John Major of the Labour Party. Although
John Major won. He did win in that election against Neil Kinnock, and I wonder whether we will look back and think we probably should have let Keir Starmer have a go at winning another one. I think you might be onto something, although Josephine in Westminster opened the batting this morning. You can't get much more southern than that. I don't mean geographically, I mean politically. Westminster and Glossop both making strong cases for Andy Burnham being installed sine, what's the Latin word for battle? Sine bellum. Is that right? The money my parents spent on my education. Keith says that's right. Keith's got the Latin. Geraint is in Chester. Geraint, what would you like to say? Geraint.
Yeah, hi, James.
Hello.
Geraint, yeah. I mean, I'm from the northwest as well, so it's where I live. So, and, you know, he's not my king of the north, so it's, as far I'm the complete opposite. I think there should be a leadership contest because, well, we need to. Well, first of all, he's already lost 2, so I think, you know, just handing on a plate the prime ministership of a country to a twice guy that's lost is a bit wrong anyway. But you need to know what he stands for. You need to get the best out from the individual contenders to see why you feel that they would be best for running the country. And to use another example, you only have to look at America, what happened over there. Biden stayed in too long. They finally got rid of him, and then they just did a coronation, and it ended in a disaster with Donald Trump in power. You need to have
that doesn't work. I mean, everybody would agree that the mistake that they made was not doing it soon enough.
Exactly. Well, they've got
so now they're doing it.
Now
they're doing it really quickly.
No, they don't have to do it really quickly. They just need to have a leadership contest to see if he is the best man in the party that's currently.
And who would you like to see in it?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, you mentioned Dan Jarvis, Al Carnes. I mean, I honestly think Wes Streeting.
Well, you know that's not going to happen because he's already said so. So, I mean, who would you like to see in it?
Well, Dan Jarvis.
Well, I don't think he's not made any signs of wanting to run so far.
Yeah.
And it has to be, I mean, I understand the point that you're making. I think it's pretty weak, but I do understand it. It would need to be, to work your point, it would need a substantive candidate, wouldn't it? It would need someone who will deliver all of the things that you want. And those things would be meaningful differences with Andy Burnham and at least comparable levels of popularity in both the parliamentary party and beyond. And, of course, that extraordinary result in Makerfield, not the win, but the scale of the win, which took absolutely everybody. Took absolutely everybody by surprise.
Let me come back on that. First of all, I mean, well, those were specific set of circumstances. I mean, it's like you saying that the Tories win in Aberdeen is suddenly going to propel them back into power.
No, it's nothing like that at all, unless 650 constituencies suddenly start drilling for oil tomorrow. So that's, again, respectfully, that's a ridiculous comparison.
I don't think so, but...
Well, remind me the name of the Tory candidate in Aberdeen.
I couldn't tell you.
No, well, that's one reason why it's a ridiculous comparison, isn't it? Because Andy Burnham is poised to become Prime Minister, so comparing that by-election to the one in Aberdeen, when you can't even remember the name of the candidate, is obviously silly.
Yeah. All right, then. Well, in terms of other things, I mean, he was up against a Reform candidate who, let's be honest, was begging to lose from all the sexist comments he was making. Like, there's no way, you know, and all the other parties were pretty much non-existent. It was almost, I wouldn't say it was tactical voting, but it was close enough. I mean, personally, it's more the sense of entitlement. Like, this is his, he should have this. don't like that. I do think that I personally just think there should be a contest. Now, like, maybe I'm not giving the most cogent argument why there should be.
That's all right. We like vibes. I mean, it's always fun to establish whether they are vibes or whether they are cogent arguments. But I was 48 before this phone-in started. 2 people have rung in saying we should have a coronation, and I moved up to about 60. Someone's rung in to say we shouldn't, and I've moved up to 75. So well done on that front, at least, Garen. It's 10:43. Anthony's in Dartford. Anthony, what would you like to say?
Hello, buddy. Yeah, thanks for taking my call. I think Andy Burnham, put him in straight away. If there's a leadership contest, if Labour want a leadership contest, they can have a leadership contest. I think Labour has spoken. I think the people in Manchester, the London and the North have spoken. I think the nation needs to see something.
Just get on with it is kind of what I'm hearing.
Exactly. Just look, we had 5 prime ministers, didn't we? Under
6.
And 6.
5 under the Tories. Sorry, yeah.
5 under the Tories. Yeah, 5 under the Tories. Okay, and non-stop leadership. I did try and go through it in my head before I rang.
I have to. Which one do you forget? Which one do you forget usually?
Do you know what? I mean, it's really trust, isn't it?
Yeah, I think I forget May sometimes. I forget Theresa May sometimes.
Oh well, no, but don't worry. She was running through the wheat fields. Don't forget that.
Yes, of course she was.
In her rebellious days.
And you don't have any worries about not seeing the stores being set out or not? I mean, if you don't know roughly what Andy Burnham stands for at this point in proceedings, then probably it's your own fault.
Yeah, I think so, and I mean, I live down south. My cousin lives up north, So,
okay.
And he lives in Manchester. He thinks Andy Burnham's been great in terms of has Andy Burnham got the parliamentary experience of being in the Houses of Parliament? No, but
he kind of has really. It was a while ago. Yeah.
Well, he was the advisor to Jeremy Corbyn, so he has, which means a lot of the Labour Party have got a lot of knowledge about Andy. Okay, also. Being a mayor of, especially like the size of Manchester, you get all your budgets set down to you by Central London and by Parliament. He's well aware of what he can do with what. He's well aware of parliamentary procedure. This isn't. I think he's got a lovely smile. I think he.
Put that on a T-shirt.
Do you know? Yeah,
I do know. Listen, I couldn't believe. James. I couldn't believe what came out of my mouth off air about 3 months ago, and Eleanor reminded me of it, and I said it on air. I think having a northern accent matters. I just think it does at this stage in our politics, and I think actually it should. I think the North has felt abandoned by Westminster for long enough, and Andy Burnham brings that absolutely into focus, and if he's got a nice smile as well, then the job is, as they say, a good one. Thank you, Anthony. So there we go. I mean, listen, feel free to have a crack at justifying or arguing for a contest, but there are questions, aren't there, that have to be answered if you're going to do that. Who would be the candidates? And why would you want them to have... Because I suppose it's not the fault of people in favour of a contest. You probably can't tell me a great deal about Al Khan's, other than the fact that he was... in the Royal Marines, I think. I get a little bit confused. One of them was a paratrooper and one of them was in the Royal Marines. I think Al Khan's might have been in both, actually. But he was certainly in the Special Boat Service, wasn't he? Anyway, military service, shall we say. But other than that, I don't know how much you can tell me about that, Darren Jones either, except he's a very, very good media performer. And that matters as well. If you find yourself in a studio and somebody wants to know how many Rice Krispies there are in a box of Rice Krispies, you have to treat them with just the right mix of contempt and amusement that people wasting their opportunity with a senior politician in such a way deserve. And Darren Jones has been very good at that. But it's not time. I get this sense of the specifics of the circumstances and that idea of, come on, this is serious, get on with it. It's probably winning at the moment, but feel free to turn that tide after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 10:49. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the question of whether or not you want a contest or a coronation is close to a consensus, in that there isn't a particular appetite, Garen in Chester notwithstanding, and also the same pretty much on my inbox. There's quite a lot of sort of continuity Starmer, and I feel that. I fully get how bruised you feel about the way that Keir Starmer has been treated, but it doesn't constitute an answer to the question of whether or not you want to see Andy Burnham enter Downing Street unchallenged by other members of his party. The two names that are in the frame currently are Darren Jones and Al Carnes, neither of whom strike me as a David Cameron figure. If you were to go back, is that just sort of 14 years, was it, or some or thereabouts? No, longer than that, nearly 20 years perhaps, when David Davis was poised to become Conservative leader. He had been sort of anointed by the right-wing press, although Michael Howard, who was the incumbent, who had announced a relatively long period of transition so that the party could get ready to fight the next election, which it did so successfully, of course. Michael Howard was very much preparing Cameron and Osborne to take over from him, with people like Gove part of the project and Daniel, now Lord Finkelstein, very much in the room where it happened. But it was just a conference. It was a party conference where Cameron delivered a decent speech and David Davis was less impressive, and the pendulum swung. The momentum shifted from the favourite to the outsider, the relative unknown, and the relative unknown came forward and took the prize. But being in opposition 2 or 3 years out from a general election is very, very different to being in power 2 years out from the last general election and 2 or 3 years out from the next one. So I do find this argument for urgency, right, get on with it, strap in and get on with it. And then the only reservation I have is that his performance last time he was in Westminster was not incredible or exciting or certainly exceptional. But people change and a different skill set is required, and there isn't any other choice there. If Dan Jarvis said, yeah, I'll have a go, I personally... my ears would prick up. But I mean, that's just me. I don't know how many other people would even recognise the name. 10:52 is the time. Mo is in Birmingham. Mo, what do you reckon?
Hello, James. Thanks for taking my call.
You're very welcome.
I think it's really important for the Labour Party to actually have a formal contest, and one that is competitive in ideas and in debate. I think, look, Andy Burnham, if he is going to be a PM, needs to make a lot of important and potentially controversial policy decisions over the next few years. And we don't want a situation where his would-be opponents, who have been cowed into silence after a non-contest this time round, start to silently brief to say, you know what, he was foisted upon us, we put our false smiles out and our false platitudes out, but we actually disagree with the man, we don't like this policy, and we get into the situation come 2028 where, you know what, he's 10 points behind Nigel Farage in the polls, and the Labour Party's in a mad panic.
Did you really? I mean, surely if Burnham was doing really badly, then the briefing would happen anyway, whether he'd won a leadership election or not.
I think the would-be opponent needs to hear the word, I've lost in a leadership contest, either from the fact that he doesn't have enough parliamentary support or the members reject him and so on. That's a very powerful mandate.
Yeah.
And the fact that you've lost, because politicians are politicians. We see it with Kemi Badenoch every week. She's the greatest politician ever who never makes a mistake. Okay. As a politician, defeat is only certain.
That's interesting.
When it's actually published.
Then, I mean, the most obvious contender would be Wes Streeting, and he's announced he's not going to do it. So who would fit the bill you describe? Who are the people that would need to hear, in their own internal dialogue, they would need to hear the words, I lost?
Well, that's where my argument slightly falls, because it is only Wes Streeting.
God bless your honesty.
Because he's the only one who you could look at conceivably sits on a different wing of the party.
I didn't think he'd sit it out. I made an informal prediction yesterday, not one of my formal predictions, because they're the ones that always come true, but an informal prediction that Wes Streeting would not sit this out, and then within 10 minutes he put out a statement saying that he would be sitting this one out. He would be offering his support to Andy Burnham, and that changed everything for me.
Yeah, my opinion on that is that I don't think he had the 81 names.
Oh, okay. I think he probably did.
That's my own personal opinion, and I think he's an intelligent guy, he knows that he doesn't want to go into a leadership contest. Let's say even he gets the 81 names, he doesn't want to go up on that day in September or whenever else when they announce the results, and he finds out he gets 5 or 10% of the membership and the trade union vote.
Yeah, I mean, you're, as you concede, it's not watertight, this argument, because of the personnel involved, but it's certainly thought provoking. Do you want to produce the next bit of the programme?
No, there's another. I think there's one other thing here.
No, hang on, that's a genuine question. Shall I take another call, or shall I play out one of the Brexit greats, one of the great top calls from the Brexit years? Because it's the celebration today. No one else is celebrating, so we're having to do it ourselves.
Unless I've missed it, I think it's good to have one of those nostalgic moments.
OK, well, there you go. Mo's in charge. Here's Robert in Rochester on the 17th of December 2018, and this at the moment is the one that I think more people have voted for this than any other, and it was already on our list, so maybe I'm going to owe Eleanor an apology by 1 o'clock today.
I actually think in order to negotiate the issue...
Who's that shouting in the background?
It's my mum.
OK.
Do apologise.
That's all right. It kind of goes with the territory for people who call themselves Brexiteers, doesn't it?
Yes. So... basically, in order to negotiate with those people who want the second referendum, why don't we make it more democratic by introducing a PR election at the same time?
Right, yes. So we change our entire electoral system by the end of March.
Well, it's not going to happen, but, it's...
What do you think you won, Robert?
What I would like is...
What do you think you won?
What I won is... basically, our whole governance, or the way that the wealth controls our country.
No. So what do you think? What do you think you won?
Well, I'm just about to explain that. I want.
No, not want. Won. WON. What do you think you won?
I won. A slap in the government's face to show them that they.
That government's gone. So what did you win?
Well, that government is a reform of the continuous politicians that are put forward instead of actually giving people and...
Let's have one more go. Take a little pause and tell me what you think you won.
What I won?
Yeah.
I won a vote to leave the EU.
No, I know that bit, but what did you win? What was the prize?
To actually undress our politicians, if that's a better way to actually put it, because
it's even worse. Incredibly, you almost deserve credit for that. So what you won to undress our politicians, and who's going to be in charge of Brexit? Well,
the way that they're dealing with Brexit is not something I agree with, because, quite frankly, I would be negotiating. But now we're back to silly rhetoric, aren't we? And ludicrous claims. Well, no,
in terms of measurable, tangible benefits, what did you win?
What did I win? I won a deregulated country.
What does that mean?
Can deregulate itself. Well, it means that we can strip away from the EU laws that we don't like.
For example?
And well, for me, one of the ones is the plug system.
Pardon?
I know it's not very hugely, but we obviously use free-pin plugs in this country.
Yes.
The EU don't. And so basically it means that our safety aspects are a lot stronger than the generalisation of the EU.
But we're in the EU.
Rather than going... Pardon?
We're in the EU. So you think we have to leave the EU to get 3-pin plugs?
No, it's about going back to some of the things where we are stronger at.
Yeah, go on. Talk me through the plugs thing. So what can we do now with plugs that we can't do as members?
Well, we can still do it, but the manufacturers
what did you win then?
Compliancy to British law.
Compliancy to British law?
Yes.
Right.
So when you bring something into this country, it has to comply to the UK.
That's what happens already. That's why we've got 3-pin plugs, you see, and they haven't.
No, because they use plastic rather than metal.
The EU sets the base level above which we are all free to go, as the fact that we have gone proves. Mate, just pause for a minute and think about what you've just done. You've come live on national radio. Yeah. You've described yourself as a Brexiteer. You're getting told off by your mum in the background. And when I've asked you what you think you've won, you've said the right to have 3-pin plugs that we already have.
it's also...
And it's
goes
10:30
further.
on Monday morning, mate.
James O'Brien on LBC.
Okay, look, that was an old clip from 2.5 years after the Brexit vote, when Robert in Rochester was somehow, I don't even know anymore, convinced that we would not have the 3 pin plugs that we did have if we hadn't voted to leave the European Union. And I took that call at 10:30 on a Monday morning, specifically the 17th of December 2018. I didn't realise when I played you the clip that would be the end of the call, and I would announce that it was 10:30 on a Monday morning. And of course, it was 11 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. So I hope that didn't cause any confusion. I can see from my inbox that some people thought that was happening in real time, but I've said it before and I'll say it again. Those people don't ring me anymore. And it's very sad. Actually, that's not true. They ring me all the time with brilliant arguments to prove that Brexit has gone superbly, but we vet our calls so assiduously. We've got extraordinary software here that we can tell immediately whether someone is much cleverer than me, and they're going to knock me into a cocked hat with brilliant Brexit benefits, and I'm so frightened of them that we never let those people on air. That is the gospel according to social media. But, of course, you are free to believe whatever you want, including, of course, the claim that Keir Starmer's house was set on fire by male prostitutes whose bills he hadn't paid. I can't get past that, and the evidence it provides of how utterly boiled this country has become. 5 minutes after 11 is the time. Nigel Farage in our news bulletin. You know, when he took that 5 minutes, I can't believe no one else has pointed this out. When he says, I wasn't in politics, said, oh, no, I fully accept blah, blah, blah. He literally owned Reform UK. I'm going to say that again, because as is often the case with Farage, I find it extraordinary how little people know about stuff that is in the public domain. He literally owned Reform UK until February of 2025. Set it up in 2018 as a private limited company with Farage holding the majority of shares. So he owned it when he took 5 million quid from Christopher Harborne in secret. He owned a political party. He owned a British political party when he took a secret 5 million quid from a Thai-based billionaire set to benefit from policies that Farage announced shortly after taking 5 million quid from a Thai-based billionaire. So please just send a postcard to your favourite interviewers and tell them that the next time he says, I wasn't in politics at the time, they have to come back and say, otherwise they not only sound ridiculous, but betray all of their viewers and listeners. You have to come back and say, well, you did actually own the party, Mr. Farage. You literally owned the party. You owned a majority of shares in a private limited company called Reform UK. So how can you possibly claim you weren't in frontline politics? You can't, you'd say, wouldn't you, normally, you can't get further into frontline politics than being the leader of a party, and he wasn't the leader of a party. It turns out you can. You can get further into politics than being the leader of a party. You can actually own it. You can own the party while secretly taking £5 million from a Thai-based crypto billionaire who subsequently would benefit from policies you announced after taking the £5 million secretly from a crypto billionaire. And pity the newsreaders who can't keep up. What's the current story? That he got it for his security? I hate this, all right? I actually hate that line that he spouts about being the most attacked politician in the country, because I imagine Joe Cox's children listening to that, or David Amos's daughter listening to that claim. He's had a milkshake thrown at him. They got murdered. And he has the audacity to claim that he's the most attacked politician in the country. The man is a whining coward. It's extraordinary that he would... Well, it's not, is it? Because this is the man that heard Henry Novak's grieving father explain that his son's death had nothing to do with racism or race, and plead with the proponents of public discourse not to pretend otherwise, and up pop Farage to claim and lie otherwise, to claim that poor Henry's ethnicity had anything to do with his death, or indeed his treatment by the police. And so we shouldn't be surprised that he would... I mean, in fact, when Joe Cox was assassinated by a white supremacist terrorist, Farage was out of the block so fast to start attacking the Remain movement that you couldn't see him for dust. That, of course, was on the morning that he unveiled that poster, the Breaking Point poster with all the echoes of Nazi propaganda. So, listen, I mean, I can do this all day, but the point is that when he comes out with one of his bloviations or some of his... I wasn't a politician when I took that money, it was a personal gift. No, it wasn't. It was a gift to the owner of a political party in this country. The actual owner of a political party in this country. So to call it a personal gift is not only an act of epic dishonesty, but it's also an act of craven sycophancy. Because what you're doing is you're allowing a man to lie about something as significant as a £5 million gift from a billionaire who subsequently saw policies being announced that would make him even richer. You're allowing him to lie that he wasn't in politics at the time when he literally owned the party that has taken in excess of £20 million from the same bloke without any of us knowing, until some journalists did some actual journalism, that he'd also taken £5 million secretly from a Thai-based billionaire. And he was the owner of the party. Do I need to write this down for people to point it out to him when he turns up for one of his traditional toe-tickling exercises? He was the owner of the party. Actually, that's not fair. He didn't get his toes tickled today. Sally Nugent on the BBC was particularly impressive on this question, which he is obviously desperate to bury. But you cannot have a politician in this country with £5 million in his pocket from a foreign-based billionaire set to benefit from policies that have already been announced, and God knows what else he's hoping for and expecting in return. Because when a liar tells you that there's no quid pro quo, when a liar tells you that the donor isn't expecting anything in return, when a liar tells you that he's the most attacked politician in British history or in recent British politics, when two British politicians are in their actual graves as a consequence of murder, then it's up to you whether or not you believe the liar. That's all. It's up to you whether or not you believe that someone who's given over £20 million to the party that he owned gave £5 million secretly to the actual owner without expecting anything in return. You are perfectly free to conclude, no, I'm sure that's entirely above board. And the bloke that gave over £20 million to the party did not give £5 million to the owner of that party in expectation of some sort of a reward or benefit. He owned the party. Even I had to double check that. I thought surely other people would have pointed that out if it's true, but somewhere in the back of my head I'm thinking, I'm sure beginning of last year, February 2025, it was announced that he'd given up ownership of Reform UK, saying he wanted to give more control to its members. I said, well, if he only gave up ownership in 2025 and he took the £5 million in 2024, then he must have been the actual owner of the party when he took the £5 million and now claims that he wasn't involved in politics at the time. How can you not be involved in politics while owning an actual party? Sheesh, do you think anyone will put that to him next time he pops his head above the parapet? I hope so. I was encouraged this morning. Some of the interviews conducted with him were pretty robust. Do you think it'd be that? I mean, how could you not point out to him that he owned the party? I'll tell you why, because it doesn't get reported properly. It doesn't get reported with anything like the attention to detail or the excitement that was reserved, for example, for Keir Starmer's spectacles. £5 million to the owner of a political party. And they expect you to believe that there was absolutely no quid pro quo involved. That's all. While we're on the subject of things that you're expected to believe, and indeed foreign-based billionaires, there are two reasons why you might want this man to be Prime Minister. One is that you're a foreign-based billionaire. That's not fair. One is that you're a billionaire, and the other is that you're a mug. And I've got some fantastic news for you. You can work out which one you are right now, just by looking at your own bank account. Are you a billionaire or are you a mug? Because if you want this character who took 5 million quid secretly from a foreign billionaire while he owned a political party to have anything to do with the running of this country, then you are either a billionaire or a mug. And it's really easy to work out which, especially with online banking. You can just click on your app, go to your current account or your savings account, go to your online banking app and have a look at whether or not you're a billionaire. Because if you're not, and you like this dude, you're a mug. Simples. It's coming up to 11:15. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And of course, part of his shtick this morning was that nobody cares, or it doesn't matter that the owner of a political party took £5 million secretly from a foreign-based billionaire. I'm tempted to do a phone-in on whether or not you care and why. Would you like to hear that today as we celebrate the great success of Brexit 10 years to the day since that referendum result came in? Would you like to tell me whether or not you care about the owner of a political party secretly accepting millions and millions of pounds from a foreign-based billionaire and thinking that it was none of your business, while he owned a party to which the same billionaire has now given in excess of £20 million? Because it feels to me like it matters. It feels to me like it matters. But hey, what do I know?
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 17 minutes after 11 and you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Let's get back to this question of coronation or contest, because it is really important. And I can feel my, what did I call it, Keith? Flux fatigue. I have to say that very carefully. It's a bit like the pheasant plucker. I've got a touch of flux fatigue, except I can feel it dissipating the longer this conversation goes on. And I think that I am of the view, Mo in Birmingham and Geraint in Chester notwithstanding, that actually we just want a new Prime Minister in place as soon as possible. It is going to be Andy Burnham, regardless of whether there's a leadership contest or not. So what benefit would there be from a leadership contest? 0345 6060 973. It's a slightly different phone hour. We won't do it for the whole hour. I got business to attend to. But it is now coming from a position where I'm about 75% persuaded that a leadership contest would be close to a waste of time. But I can always swing back again. You know that. Anna is in Wandsworth. Anna, what would you like to say?
This is a great pleasure. I've never succeeded in getting through to you before.
Well, Lord, the pressure's on now. I hope there's no sense of anticlimax when we move towards the end of this call.
I don't think so, no. Well, just to say, by the way, the Brexit Party was also Farage's company, so that's just an aside. Well, I've come right round in my way of thinking over the weekend, and this is really interesting, I think, for your listeners.
Because do you? Gosh.
I do.
Go on.
I do, and this is the reason. Okay. And I'm not a flip-flopper, okay? I do my research. So I started off as a Corbynite, and then I turned to Keir Starmer. Because I was pragmatic and I supported him, and I am a member of the Labour Party and I've campaigned, etc. In the weekend, I was furious on Friday. I was very angry on Friday with the situation, and I didn't want Keir Starmer to resign. But I sort of, I took myself away, and I basically sat down and I read a lot of information, a lot of articles, a lot of information that's come my way, and also from the groups that surround Andy Burnham, Compass being the main one. And I have come to the decision, as your caller, the second caller today, the very energetic sounding lady.
Yes, in Glossop, Sue, I think.
Yes,
in Glossop.
That's right. I've come to believe that is the way forward, and the reason for that is we are in that cliche. We are in unprecedented times because the globe is being swamped by this far right insurgency, and we know full well that Farage wants to introduce Project 2025 into this country if he gets to be installed in the hot seat. We know that, he is linked at least with Russia, and Russia's intention was to get Keir Starmer out, and no doubt will be to get Andy Burnham out. So we have the battle of our lives on our hands right now, and I think Andy Burnham has the plan.
Do you? Because I'm not.
Yes,
well, that's good to know. You've done the homework. I mean, to be fair, traditionally it should be the host that's done the homework and the caller that hasn't, as Robert in Rochester demonstrated rather brilliantly just before the 11 o'clock news in a blast from the Brexit past. But that's really reassuring in that you put flesh upon the Burnham bones by reading up on who he is and what he's done.
A publication called Mainstream, or rather a group called Mainstream. Have a look at what they've done, and also Compass. I was a member of Compass before I joined Labour, so I do know what Compass are about, and a lot of things like assemblies, and
he's fully signed up for that. I suppose one danger is that he did seem quite wobbly when he was last in Westminster. He did. This is what I think is most important post-Starmer is that the first few big announcements, the first few big interventions have to be absolutely solid. They cannot risk any form of reversal or U-turn. And that means they just have to get everything absolutely right and stress tested before they announce it. And even if it's unpopular initially, they have to back it. They have to defend it to the hilt. And that's my worry, is that Burnham hasn't demonstrated in the past that he is possessed of that sort of steeliness.
I think he's matured. But also, I think he's got a good team behind him. He's got a good support system behind him. He has got a plan. I think that's the main thing. That's what I was worried about on Friday.
Yeah, fair enough.
Whether he had a plan. Because I know Keir Starmer did have a plan, but it was going too slowly, and people weren't seeing results.
And he wasn't selling it well enough, even if it had been, even if Burnham doesn't go faster, he needs to sell every milestone on that journey a lot more effectively than Starmer has done. And again, I can be optimistic about that, but not perhaps not fatalistic. I have the... the memories of what he was like last time he was in Westminster, and don't see what you see, but you've done more work on it than I have, so your opinion counts for more than mine does. Did that call live up to your expectations, Anna?
I'm surprised as well. Yes, it did.
No, you did brilliantly. I hope it's not. I hope it's not your last. Albeit that it is your first. 11:23 is the time. Got more clips to play. Have we got any votes coming in? The one that gets the most votes is the one that I'm not in. But it was by far the best Brexit call ever to this radio station. It just was. I can say that, even though the Brexit calls to this radio station in many ways changed every aspect of my professional life. 23 after 11 is the time. Lucien is in Amsterdam. Lucien, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hello, James. Thanks for taking my call. Yes, great fan of your show. And should I offer my condolences to Britain regarding the Brexit vote?
Excuse me, we're celebrating. It's our 10th anniversary today. We're having... Keith, have we got any sound effects yet? No? Still waiting.
My most sincere congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I bet you wish you weren't in that pesky old European Union, Lucien.
Yes, indeed. Well, we're not the nation to impose economic sanctions on itself.
Yeah, so, fool you. I bet you've still got those two pin plugs, haven't you? Carry on, Lucy. What made you pick up the phone today?
Funny, ironic analogy.
Yes.
Concerning the Andy Burnham case. Coronation or contest, and you say, I hear you. I've heard you saying coronation is or a contest is an actual waste of time. That's what we of the Dutch Labour Party thought in 2010, when suddenly, the very celebrated party leader he stepped down, and there was the Amsterdam mayor. Who was the most? He was actually the to be coronated candidate.
Yes.
So nobody in his right mind in the party dare to contest him, or at least nobody who had a serious chance. Only the chances would have would have entered the contest if it were called.
Right.
But it wasn't called because everyone was sure that this Amsterdam mayor would be the best one for the job. So he was, in fact, within a few weeks' time, he was installed as the leader of the Labour Party, and also the leader of the elections that were held a few months after that. And then the debate started, and there was some sort of change in position because everyone knew him as the well-celebrated mayor of Amsterdam, well-respected. Everyone thought he was a great listener.
Yeah.
He was a great listener, and he was great in conference rooms, etc. But he wasn't so great in the debate when he was amongst his peers. So his peers, leaders from other parties, whose only ambition was to just to let him stumble and trip, stumble and fall.
Yeah.
So, and in that environment, he just sank, and he sank sensationally.
Really?
I
should know this, shouldn't I?
Yeah, his name is Job Cohen, and he was the party leader between 2010 and early 2012. When and in 2012 the situation of the Labour Party had become so dire that the Socialist Party, so let's say the old communists, they were just running ahead of the Labour Party.
Gosh.
So yes.
Well, I don't know that. Yeah, I mean, there will be a threat, of course, to Andy Burnham's Labour Party from the left, although not the communist left, and of course the graver threat at the moment is coming from the right. Did he have any pre-mayoral political history? Because Burnham has been a cabinet minister, and he knows his way around Westminster. He doesn't sound to me as if he's quite as much of an unknown quantity as the mayor of Amsterdam, as in the difference between the national and the urban stage.
He had ample experience as a politician, actually, because he had been the Secretary of State for
that's
for
what
migration.
I wondered. Okay, and it all went wrong. It all went wrong very, very quickly. So you're here like Banquo's ghost at the feast to remind us of what could all go horribly wrong. Thank you, Lucian. And these are important voices of caution. And would a contest... That's the point, actually, isn't it? A contest would highlight potential flaws. It would give people an opportunity to rethink their current enthusiasm, a kind of caveat emptor, given that there's been a Latin theme to today's programme, and you get a chance to run the rule over what you're buying before you actually make the final decision to hand the money over. Final call on this, I think. We'll move on to something else subsequently. John's in Forest Hill. John, what do you reckon?
I think a contest would benefit Andy Burnham, and he should state that he would welcome one. Firstly, I think it would give him legitimacy. If he's been voted in against with opponents by his party, he is more legitimate. But more importantly, I think a contest gives him time to plan. It's going to give him 2 or 3 months to assemble his cabinet, to choose the right chancellor, to create a policy platform. And you just said to one of your callers, they have to get everything right from day one.
Yes, they do.
Time to plan would give him a better chance of getting it right from day one. It would give his cabinet time to formulate their policy platforms and to get on top of their briefs and to hit the ground running. It would give, you've used the word stress test, it would give the opportunity to stress test his ideas and his policies to see how the markets are going to react to his ideas. It gives time for the public to get to know him. Remember Kamala Harris?
I don't buy that analogy. It's obviously got some traction, but the whole point with Kamala Harris was that they took too long to do it. They should have actually done it much sooner. They should have torn off the plaster with regards to Joe Biden and replaced him much more quickly without a challenge and without any contests.
Yes, and Kamala didn't have chance to sell herself through the primaries. And if Burnham isn't going to have a chance to sell himself through
But you're forgetting who the electorate is.
The electorate... The
electorate is Labour members.
Yeah, the electorate is Labour members. The people he has to win over is the public.
I don't think it works like that.
And going back to Starmer...
No, you can't just gloss over that. It's quite a big point, because everything you've said made it sound as if we all got a vote on who the next Labour leader is, or indeed who the next Prime Minister is, and we don't. It's only Labour members. And if they haven't got a clear idea of who Andy Burnham is yet, then they probably shouldn't be Labour members.
Fine. Then addressing your point, with a contest, he has to sell himself to his electorate, which are the Labour MPs.
Which he's already done, as we saw yesterday, when over 200 of them sort of carried him into Parliament on their proverbial shoulders.
Okay, fine. And
Wes Streeting has come out and said, I'm backing him as well. I think Wes Streeting's probably done his homework.
Well, I think it's a given. It's a given that he's going to be elected. Okay,
it's not going to be a very robust leadership contest then, is it?
I think the important things here are not what happens within his electorate. It's what happens in the back office. It's the planning. It's the round of media.
Well, it's going to be. Listen, if there's a battle, it's over by July the 16th. If there isn't a battle, it's over by July the 9th, as far as I can tell.
Well, no. If there's a battle, then he's got to spend the next month or so, basically selling his policies publicly
with a lame duck Prime Minister in power.
But so what?
Well, so a lot, I think, if you're worried about the state of the nation. You make some interesting points, but I do think you perhaps forgot who the electorate was, and that everything you said would carry a lot more weight if we were talking about a plebiscite, if we were talking about a national vote on who's next. But we're not. We're talking about the Labour membership, who have made their feelings pretty clear on this. Clearer than I can remember, actually. Probably the clearest I can remember since Tony Blair resigned and nobody wanted to stand in Gordon Brown's way. And you could, of course, also cite that as a reason not to repeat history. It's 11:32. Dominic Ellis has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:36 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we will, I think, shake the old Etch-a-Sketch and move on. Here's the thing, right? When you have a deeply dishonest politician on the march, in a strong position, and we learned this from watching Donald Trump, didn't we? It's very difficult to keep up. What you have to do is trust your convictions, the courage of your convictions. So, to be fair, my inbox today isn't full of people saying, would you please stop going on about Nigel Farage's secret £5 million donation and the fact that he's told 3 or 4 conflicting stories about it, and also claims he wasn't in politics when he accepted it, despite the fact that he owned the actual party that he is now the leader of. I'm just an extraordinary tapestry of misinformation and bloviation, isn't it? Truly extraordinary. But I am, of course, as I said to you at 10 o'clock this morning, I am fascinated by events, and I love talking about events, even as I find them repellent. And I think the way it works is that if you say it often enough, then it becomes true. If you achieve power, then you force people to agree with you. I don't know how much attention you're paying to what Donald Trump appointments say about the 2020 election, but it is horrible to watch. It's the kind of thing that you probably thought was confined either to less developed countries or the history books, where Donald Trump wants, or his regime wants, an appointment made to a key role, and they get occasionally exposed to proper scrutiny and questioning in Congress, and they are asked who won the election, and they say things like, Joe Biden was ratified as the winner of the 2020 election, and then they say, who won the 2025, was it 25, the next one? Who won the next election? And they say Donald Trump did. So they can say Donald Trump won the election, but they can't say Joe Biden did, because they know it will get them into trouble with the liar-in-chief. And that's how it works. That's how it works. You just keep lying. And you start off taking with you the people who love your lies because you excuse their racism or their misogyny or their climate change denial. The climate change denial used to be confined, of course, to the funders, but they're more likely to have their money in crypto now than they are in fossil fuels. So we may need to slightly rejig that part of the triangle. But you keep lying until even people who know that you're lying sort of lose sight of the fact that you're lying. So the disputed election result is a bit like saying the disputed phenomenon called gravity, or the disputed spherical nature of the moon, or the disputed non-flatness of the earth. You find an absolute weapon who will argue that up is down, and you can talk about, if you're a certain type of journalist, and we've seen this in the States tragically, horribly, you can talk about the disputed 2020 election when it's not disputed at all. Even Fox News, whose relationship with the truth is tenuous at best, had to pay out hundreds of millions of dollars after amplifying some of the lies that were made about that election, although you wouldn't know it from their current coverage of the liar-in-chief. So you have to call this stuff out. And of course, not just the dishonesty, but also the attendant horror show, like the claim. There's a real snobbery to what they say about their candidate's comments about Carol Vorderman, the comments that he responded to and endorsed about. I mean, I don't even want to say it on the radio. I interviewed Carol about it at the time. But there's a real snobbery. It's as if Nigel Farage thinks that people who didn't go to schools like his, men who didn't go to schools like his, publicly, repeatedly express a desire to... Forgive me for this, all right? If the kids are in the car, you might just want to turn me down for a second. Nigel Farage seems to think that people with northern accents or working class backgrounds spend their lives telling each other how much they would like to sniff famous women's bottoms. The snobbery attached to that is extraordinary, right? Because I'm pretty sure that Richard Tice doesn't come into meetings at Reform HQ and start talking about how much he wants to do that. I'm pretty sure he doesn't. 30p Lee, I'm less sure, to be honest with you. But not because of his class or his background, just because of his general demeanour. Do you think that Zia Yusuf comes into Reform UK meetings with a list of all the women's bottoms that he'd like to spend the weekend sniffing? Because that's what Nigel Farage thinks is normal. If you're talking about a plumber in Makerfield. The snobbery attached to that is off the charts. Of course, rich people, even allegedly educated people, will be misogynistic and hideous. They might, for example, confess to sex offending on a conversation they didn't realise was being recorded. And Farage will pass that off as locker room banter. And the rest of us will sit here and say, I would never boast to a friend about grabbing women by their private parts. I would never, either privately or publicly, express a desire to sniff a famous woman's bottom. I would never, and nor would any of the men that I know. Not as banter, not as humour, not as locker room talk, not as any of those things. And yet, either Nigel Farage does it all the time, or he believes that's how other men behave, or he's lying again. And to be honest with you, the third theory is probably the most persuasive. He's lying again because he has to stick up for the misogynist. The alternative would be to call out the misogyny. And because the three things always go hand in hand, the racism, the misogyny and the climate change denial, or the cryptocurrency friendly policies, because they always go hand in hand, you can't tug one thread without pulling apart the rest of it. You can't say, that's misogynistic and disgusting, this bloke has no place in our party. So he has been, he's been asked about that, I think, today. But he's also been asked about this money that he keeps taking. The 5 million quid he took while owner of Reform UK. And it's extraordinary to reflect upon how much his story has changed. For example, when the story first emerged, he claimed that it was a gift to fund his security.
It wasn't political in any sense at all, but it was for one purpose. I've been the most attacked, physically, politician of modern times, and yet despite repeated requests to the Home Office, the police, for protection and help, I've been denied at every twist and turn. This money is the only way I can look after myself and protect myself for the rest of my life.
I almost think I should issue a trigger warning to the families of Joe Cox and David Amos when we play a clip like that of him claiming that he's the most physically attacked politician of modern times when he's talking about milkshakes and they have buried a loved one. It's extraordinary. It's almost evil, the mentality behind that sort of lie, that sort of exaggeration. And then, I don't remember precisely, yes I do, of course I do, it's my job to. Just a couple of weeks later, he changed his story again.
It's very unusual for someone to give up 27 years of their life to campaign for something, and this was given to me on an unconditional basis, completely unconditional basis, but frankly, it was given as a reward for campaigning for Brexit for 27 years.
Well, that's a political donation then, isn't it? That's a quid pro quo. Why did Christopher Harborne, who's based in Thailand, want Brexit? Answers on a postcard, please, but he's given $20-odd million to the party that Nigel Farage owned when he gave him £5 million secretly and in private. So that's two completely conflicting stories. Either it was to fund his security, which will be very carefully assessed. The threat level will be very, very carefully assessed, as it is with all sitting parliamentarians. And some, of course, are much more vulnerable than others. But as a general rule, the kind of people who find Nigel Farage repellent are not the kind of people that you'll find setting fire to hotels or throwing bricks at the police. So the assessment of what kind of threat... I'll tell you how pathetic he is. He once claimed on the record that I incited violence against him, whereas, of course, all I ever do is play you clips of him speaking his own words. How desperate and pathetic would you have to be to claim that I was capable of inciting violence against somebody who calls for pure cold rage in the aftermath of a horrible crime, whereas all I ever call for is peace and love and friendliness. Oh no, and honesty, which is of course where we depart. So he changed his story then, and claimed that it was a reward for Brexit. This morning he did an interview round, and Sally Nugent on the BBC took the question a little bit further, and he's so thin-skinned, like all bullies and cowards. He's so thin-skinned. It's why he's been hiding for the last several weeks and why he barely ever turns up in Parliament anymore, because he knows he'll get asked for it, and he's hoping that it will just go away. Or that if he lies about it often enough, and you can't say that he hasn't lied because both things can't be true. If it was to fund his security, then it wasn't a reward for Brexit. And if it was a reward for Brexit, then it wasn't to fund his security. So what exactly was it for? Sally Nugent this morning on the BBC wondered.
Look, it's literally none of your business. If I've given it to charity, but the truth is, I haven't. I know what it's there for.
You haven't spent any of it?
It's none of your business. It's literally none of your... How much of your salary do you spend on beer, on petrol? It's none of your business.
I think it is the public's business to know...
No, it's not the public's business.
Well, it's being investigated by the Parliamentary Standards Committee, so it's somebody's business. You're saying you need security, a legitimate point. Yeah. How much of that money have you spent on security so far?
I'm sorry. I know I'm not going to answer that deliberately, willfully.
Do you wish that you had declared this money at the time?
It is not your business at the BBC to put me in danger, therefore I will not answer that.
I would just like to clarify, do not make any mistake, we are not putting you in any danger at all.
If I answer that question you ask, so I won't.
It is 11:47, and even Nick Ferrari this morning on LBC was reluctant to let him off the hook too quickly. It got quite heated, this conversation. It was a bit like when Ricky and Bianca broke up.
Nigel Farage, please, what has happened to this £5 million gift?
With all due respect, what's it got to do with you?
Well, because it speaks to the position of you hold in office. Initially, we were told that it was because of your personal security and it would pay for that for the rest of your life. Then apparently it was some kind of reward for campaigning for Brexit. I am told we have two different stories. Which is the truth?
Well, I think you're contradicting yourself there, aren't you?
Well, if you tell me what happened with the £5 million, then we're solved.
It's an unconditional gift. I can spend it on Ferraris if I want. That'd be entirely up to me.
Why did you say it was for personal security then?
Because it was given as an unconditional gift, right? The understanding is, and you know very well, I've been physically more attacked over many years than any other
I've been with you when you've been abused. I've seen that. But my listeners want to know, Mr. Farage, how much has been spent?
Nick, I can deal with it as I want. I can do what I want with it. I can put it on the horses.
Yes, you are under review, though, by the Parliamentary Standards Commissioner.
Well, and maybe we shouldn't be discussing it in that case. But what I will say to you is, I know that I will need protection until I die.
It is 11:48, so there it is. He claims that he is particularly vulnerable, while simultaneously celebrating a woman who called for people to be set on fire in asylum hotels. Literally inviting her onto the stage. I mean, it's incredible how disingenuous he is. He claims to be more attacked than any other politician when 2 have been assassinated in recent living memory. And when you push him as a journalist, he claims that you somehow, by asking him questions, to which he often replies dishonestly, he claims that you are inciting violence. How does it incite violence against Nigel Farage, asking him why a billionaire gave him £5 million? And of course, even before we found out that a billionaire gave him £5 million, the journalists, and there aren't many of us, who do a decent job of holding him to an account and explaining what a charlatan he is, he'll claim that they incite violence against him as well. So imagine if I came on the radio and called for pure cold rage to be directed at Nigel Farage. Pure cold rage to be directed at that man. That would make me dangerous and irresponsible. All I do is either laugh at him or point out to you what a massive liar he is. How does he respond to that?
For me, you're reaching out into your critics. I mean, how would you convince your old LBC chum, James O'Brien? I mean, he says you stoke division, you know, all this.
I think he's somebody someone that incites violence.
Do you?
I do. I don't think he should be broadcasting.
He would deny that.
He has caused so much hatred towards me, it's just not true. And, you know, I might have been criticised in the past, you know, for attacking people in the European Parliament. All I ever did was tease them. You know, some of these people, some of what's being said in media and being repeated out there in the streets, particularly since the riots, is really unfair.
The riots that he's never condemned, of course, and which many people consider he incited. And the riots that were the backdrop to that woman claiming that she wanted to see all of the hotels containing asylum seekers set on fire. A woman who was subsequently provided with a hero's welcome on stage at the party conference for the party that Nigel Farage leads and used to own. In fact, the party that he owned when he accepted the £5 million from Christopher Hardbourne. And some of the stuff he said about those hideous comments directed at Carol Vorderman probably merit repetition as well. So we'll have a listen to them shortly, and we may even catch up with Carol herself about her latest thoughts on this horrible saga that has been inflicted upon her by Farage and his misogynistic mates.
James O'Brien on LBC.
55 is the time, and so to ITV after the BBC, where Nigel Farage this morning responded to Ranveer Singh's question about what he'd learned about female voters from the Makerfield by-election, where Farage's candidate was, of course, a self-described sexist who had expressed, frankly, extraordinary views regarding Carol Vorderman, who will join us after this.
Traditionally, new political movements attract more male than female voters to begin with. Men take risks, I think, much more easily, maybe much less responsibly in some cases. I think in Makerfield we had a problem.
Which was?
With some of the historic things. Look, our candidate, great bloke, plumber, rugby player, ex-army guy.
And sexist.
Drinker, one of the lads. And, you know, if you go into pubs tonight when England are playing football, you would hear all sorts of banter that in the cold light of day would not look good. That did us harm.
And you didn't ask him to apologise to, say, for example, Carol Vorderman. Was that a mistake on your part?
Well, I think Carol Vorderman, you know, writing letters to every constituent and directly involving herself.
All the women.
Directly involving herself in a political campaign. I think there's some serious questions.
Well, she was brought into it. She was brought into it because your candidate didn't apologise to her. And I'm wondering, as a leader,
you can't even say on breakfast television what was said because it's so bad.
No. And it will be in every pub tonight. That's the point I'm making.
Oh no,
I'm afraid.
Most men do not say that kind of thing about women.
What was said by him was lads banter. I don't approve of it. I don't approve of it at all. All right, not at all in any way.
I mean, speaking of pubs, during England's last game against Croatia, he posted a picture of himself in a pub that was 2 years old, wearing an England shirt. That's a measure of the man for you. So quite what he's basing his experience of pub-based banter on is at the very best 2 years out of date and at the very worst completely invented. Carol Vorderman, people probably don't fully appreciate that you, despite being one of the most recognisable faces on our television screens for years, your childhood and your early years were far from luxurious or privileged. You come effectively from a working class background. Did all the men you knew growing up speak like that?
No. And I hasten to add, they go, oh, yeah, you hear it on building sites. So I grew up in abject poverty in North Wales, and the strip of North Wales that's kind of very much attached to Liverpool, Chester, Manc. And then I lived in Leeds for many years. We recorded Countdown up there at Yorkshire Television. And, I would regard my sort of essence as really a northerner, but certainly not one from the southeast. And it's like, my stepfather was a builder. I spent so many years on building sites. I worked I studied civil engineering. I worked on a construction site in Snowdonia, underground. Me, the only woman with 2,000 men. Nobody ever said those things to me. Nobody. And Nigel Farage is an absolute disgrace. And there when he said, oh, yes, well, it's just lads banter. But of course I don't approve. Every time he just fails. And when he was up in Makerfield last week, and he was asked the question again about this online abuse by Kenyon, he went, so what? Reform is an anti-women company. Let's be honest, it's a company owned by Farage. And,
he doesn't own it anymore, although he did own it when he accepted £5 million from Christopher Harborne, despite not being involved in politics at the time.
So I am pleased that the result in Makerfield was a dramatic one for the tactical vote, and also because we know that the letter and keeping on talking about Rob Kenyon's sexism, including on Question Time, as you will have seen, led a lot of women to change their vote. And I'm very happy about that. And, Farage saying, oh, she shouldn't be covered and shouldn't be involved in political campaigning. Well, I've news for you, love, if you're listening. I'll carry on doing what I want to do in this country.
And just to clarify, Carol Vorderman, you do that with your own money, do you, as opposed to with secret donations from Thai-based billionaires?
James, as you know, I get sacked from jobs for speaking my mind. I lose money.
Not from LBC, for the record. Absolutely.
No, I was not sacked by LBC. No, quite the opposite. That was for health reasons. That was and exhaustion. No, by the BBC. And no, I've never had a donation from anybody.
Do you think when we could possibly rectify that. I'm sure we could start a crowdfunder. What do you think that he talks like that himself, or that the men he knows talk like that? Or do you think, because he obviously, when Donald Trump talked about grabbing women by their private parts, he seemed to be under the impression that that's how all men talk? Or is he just covering up for the misogyny of his candidates and friends in the case of Kenyon and Trump? Or does he just knock about with a particularly unsavoury bunch of men? What do we think is going on here?
I think that fundamentally is who he is. It's a combination of all of those things that you say. He thinks he's on a roll. He isn't. Reform is on their way out now. As we know, even over the last year, it went down from almost 35% in the polls to now about 23%. And they're just going down, down, down. I predict he will leave the party probably by the end of next year when they get down to sort of 16% in the polls, and they're an also-ran party. And just like he did in 2019, he just gifted it to Boris Johnson, didn't he?
He could retire to spend more time with other people's money. You also predicted that Keir Starmer wouldn't lead Labour into the next general election when we spoke a couple of years ago. I had to be reminded of that by somebody. So perhaps Mystic Carol is the name that we should apply to you.
The Whisperer.
Yeah. Why were you so confident of that?
Well, that was in the Labour Party conference last September.
Yeah.
And I had the chance to do it. And there were about 400 or 500 people in the audience, all obviously Labour Party members, and many of them were councillors. And I was with Carol Cadwallader on the stage and said, look, Keir Starmer, my prediction, will never be voted in again as Prime Minister. And if you want to win another election, you're going to have to change the leader. And then I did some half-joking stuff about Andy Burnham, about, oh, Andy. And interestingly then, so it's almost a year ago, at the Labour Party conference, having said all of that, more or less got a standing ovation from the whole audience.
And that's when you knew.
It kind of said what was going on at the time.
Yeah. Well, we're grateful for your insights, both the clairvoyant ones and the slightly more personal ones. And I know that you can talk about being thick-skinned and having dealt with this kind of conduct, or not specifically this kind of conduct, but various degrees of misogyny throughout your life. But I've said it to you before, and I'll say it again. I don't think you should have to. I don't care how thick your skin is. I think it's disgusting that you have been personally exposed to these kind of comments and the defence of them by Nigel Farage, and that your children have to see it. And even if it is water off a duck's back for you, I'm really sorry that you have to endure it.
Well, that's I'm sorry for women who haven't had my kind of background, who have to endure it. And this whole daily grind that women have to put up with online, and also obviously offline, I think it's time to say enough now. But in many ways, it's like oxygen to me, because I love a fight with a wrong 'un. I love it.
Long may it continue, Carol Vorderman. And remind me never to get on the wrong side of you. Carol Vorderman, live responding to comments from Nigel Farage this morning about the deeply misogynistic online comments made by his self-described sexist defeated candidate in Makerfield, Rob Kenyon. And just to clarify, Farage insists that the £5 million gift is not a donation, it's a gift, although it was both a reward for Brexit and indeed for his security, but also unconditional for him to spend on whatever he wanted. And this morning on interviews, he was comparing it with salaries. He was asking presenters what they did with their salary and suggesting that he had as much right to know what they spent their salary on, as in the money they received for services rendered, as what he spent the money he received from Christopher Harborne on. So it was Nigel Farage this morning who was drawing parallels between what he calls a gift and other people's salary, as in the wages they receive for doing what their employer wants them to do. I'm not sure he realised that. It's 12:04.
James O'Brien on LBC.
And it's 8 minutes after 12. Welcome to the party. We are celebrating on this programme the 10th anniversary of the Brexit referendum, because none of the people that won seem to be keen to celebrate it. Some of them keep saying we should stop talking about it, despite the fact that this week alone it was reported to have sustained a 6% hit to our GDP. Later in the hour, I'll play you a conversation I had earlier this morning with Michel Barnier, who, of course, was the chief negotiator for the European Commission over that epic saga dealing with, it's almost impossible to keep track of how many prime ministers he was dealing with, albeit that he didn't conduct the negotiations in the first instance with the actual prime ministers, and not long after that he became prime minister himself of France for about 6 months. A fascinating politician, a fascinating man, very dignified man, a kind of reminder of what our politicians used to look like when it was people like Michael Heseltine stalking the corridors of power, or Neil Kinnock. But I don't know, we seem to have come a very long way from those days. Hopefully, I thought, personally, Keir Starmer might signal a return to them, but that hope has proved to be forlorn. What I want you to tell me is, and this is a slightly odd question for me to ask you, because I obviously have a very resounding answer to it, which I've written I've written an entire book that is almost an answer to this question. There is some other stuff in it as well. But how much of our current mess is attributable, not in full, but at least in part, to Brexit? I mean, it is extraordinary, isn't it, that the massed ranks of the media, I mean, almost all of the media, even the bits of the media that weren't in favour of it, hedged their bets by getting their Sunday title to be in favour of it. At the Times, for example, where their daily title ostensibly wasn't. But Rupert Murdoch, of course, was. I think he just felt that the Times newspaper in that era, in that 10 year ago period, the readers wouldn't really stomach a position as stupid as supporting leaving the European Union. But leave the European Union we did. Speaking of newspapers, the Daily Express today, which has sort of become a Bible for the hard of thinking, goes with a front page claiming that there is a brilliant Brexit, but it goes to a different school. That isn't quite what it says on their front page, but it may well have done, because that is the point that they make. With a front page on the morning after a British Prime Minister resigned, the Daily Express goes for, "Give us a proper Brexit." Indeed, they've sort of mocked up a picture of the White Cliffs of Dover upon which to stick that claim, "Give us a proper Brexit." And of course, none of them can tell you what a proper Brexit would be. Or rather, they can tell you what a proper Brexit would be, because a proper Brexit is what they got. But they can't admit that, because what they got was a load of rot. And it certainly didn't bear any resemblance to what they were promised they would get by various liars and charlatans, some of whom continue to dominate public discourse in this country. And don't please think for a minute that that's accidental or coincidental or a mark of any particular skills on the part of the liars and charlatans. You know, Johnson gets rewarded with a column in the Daily Mail. Johnson gets rewarded with a free house in the garden of the bloke that owned JCB after he got slung out by his own party. But these people get rewarded by the establishment, even as they claim to be anti-establishment. David Frost writing in the Telegraph last week about the establishment having it in for... But who is the establishment if it's not the Daily Telegraph? Who is the establishment if it's not Rupert Murdoch? Who is the establishment if it's not Boris Johnson? Who on earth is this establishment that Nigel Farage is supposed to be opposed to? They got the only Brexit that was available. Anything other than what they got would have been immeasurably worse, and anything better than what they got would have involved retaining freedom of movement, because you can't have freedom of movement of goods or freedom of movement of money or freedom of movement of services without having freedom of movement of people. Those four things were inalienable and inseparable. Always were, and almost certainly always will be. Although some of what Michel Barnier said to me about the circumstances in which we could rejoin the European Union, while not necessarily newsworthy, because he's made similar noises before, were of great interest to me, and I suspect will be to you. So it's mad to me, but utterly and dispiritingly unsurprising, that 10 years after the event, you have my old newspaper, actually, the Daily Express, although it was a very different organ then, can still be selling this bilge to its readers, can still be gaslighting them, grooming them into believing that they weren't conned in 2016. Oh, don't worry, you weren't conned. It's just that Boris Johnson didn't deliver what you wanted. What, the same Boris Johnson that you treated like a cross between Champion the Wonder Horse and Mother Teresa for his entire premiership? Yeah, that bloke. Yeah, it turns out he was a wrong 'un. Well, what, shouldn't you have told us at the time? Shouldn't Farage have told you that Johnson was a wrong 'un when he stood down his own MP candidates in order to grease Boris Johnson's passage into Downing Street? So who are you blaming for the fact that Brexit has failed? Carol Vorderman and you. James O'Brien and Carol Vorderman and Gary Lineker. Well, I'm only half joking, because they do and they will. But if Brexit was not delivered, if what was delivered was not a proper Brexit, whose fault was it? It was Boris Johnson that delivered the Brexit you got. It was Boris Johnson that got cheered to the rafters for delivering the Brexit that you got. It was Boris Johnson that got greeted delivering a Brexit very, very similar to the one that Theresa May had organised, but which, of course, he managed to mastermind the removal of Theresa May from Downing Street for organising. There was never anything better on the table if you didn't accept freedom of movement of people, and the racists couldn't do that. So everything they got is all they were ever going to get. There was that horrible window where they were so stupid that they flirted with the idea of taking something even worse than what they got. And they would go on about WTO, let's go WTO, or we can come out on World Trade Organization. And if you asked any of them what that meant, they would fall apart like a cheap suit. The strangest, perhaps the most significant political experience of my professional life, and I've told you this a million times, but it's the 10th anniversary of Brexit. No one else is celebrating, so I'll tell you again, was when I sat in a television studio with a man called Pascal Lamy. a former Director General of the World Trade Organization. And sitting opposite him in that television studio was a woman called Andrea Leadsom. And I'm not being unkind, but I can't think of anything to add now where I said about Pascal Lamy, a former Director General of the World Trade Organization. All I can think of to say about Andrea Leadsom is that she has never and had never and will never have anything whatsoever to do with the World Trade Organization. And this was when Johnson thought that threatening the European Union with a no deal would somehow frighten them into acquiescence. It would be a bit like me turning up at your house and saying, if you don't give me all your money, I'm going to chop my own leg off. And you'd probably not give me all your money at that point. But that was the tactic that was being deployed by Boris Johnson and the boy genius Dominic Cummings. And part of that threat involved saying, well, if we go WTO, we'll be better off, we'll be fine, we'll be laughing. And people turned up with banners going, let's go WTO. People who believed in things like bendy bananas were convinced, they persuaded, by then the damage had already been done. Their poor tiny little brains had been boiled into oblivion, and they actually thought that World Trade Organization rules were preferable or desirable or even feasible. They didn't know what it even meant. But by then their brains were so boiled that they just grabbed onto it and pretended not only that they understood what it meant, but that they wanted it. And the BBC, being what it was, and sadly still is, insisted that I interviewed Andrea Leadsom alongside the man who used to run the World Trade Organization. So I can turn to the man that used to run the World Trade Organization and I could say, what would it mean if we were to come out on WTO rules? And he could tell me, politely, that it didn't really mean anything because it was more or less impossible, and that if it did mean anything, it would be awful. No trade deals with anybody ever. So we sort of either become an ashtray for all the stuff in the world that nobody else wants to buy because it breaks all the rules, all the regulations, all the health and safety provisions. Or, I mean, there wasn't even an answer to the question because it was such a stupid question. But Pascal Lamy was an honourable man, still is an honourable man, and he was able to explain what a ludicrous prospect WTO rules was. And then I have to turn to Andrea Leadsom and invite her to tell him why he's wrong. On Newsnight on the BBC, not on GBBs, on actual Newsnight. Could you please tell the former Director General of the World Trade... Hello, lady, who has never worked for the World Trade Organization, never will work for the World Trade Organization, has absolutely no understanding of the World Trade Organization, and has never had anything to do with the World Trade Organization, and quite possibly struggles to spell WTO. Could you please explain to the former Director General of the World Trade Organization why you know more about it than he does? That was the moment. Two things happened. Number one, I thought, I can't do this anymore. I can't pretend to be impartial. It's like being impartial about gravity or being impartial about rain. It's either happening or it's not. And the second thing I thought was that this doesn't get undone when it's over. This is so deep now. This runs so deep into our country, into our discourse. It's going to take generations to undo it. We are treating fools and liars as if they are the intellectual equivalent of experts and people who've actually done the job. We are elevating fools and liars to the same status as the people who know what they're talking about, and we're calling it balance. So when I look at the state of the country and I wonder why we're in such a mess, why we've had, or will soon have had, 7 prime ministers in under 11 years, I look at riots on our streets. I look at incredible levels of civil disobedience. The civil disobedience itself isn't new, but the levels of it are. Certainly inviting a woman who calls for pogroms to be feted on the stage of a British political party. These are new developments. And I want you to tell me how much of it goes back to Brexit and why and how. Because it does. But I want to know how much of it does, and I want to know why it does, and I want to know how it does. 0345 60973. I've also got a bunch of clips. We barely scratched the surface of these. We've got the brown faces behind the tills at Tesco bloke. Do you remember him? We've got all the classics here. We've even got one. I feel a little sorry for Ashley and Pinner, because this was a call that I conducted with countless people at the time. Someone persuaded that the best reason to leave the European Union is because we won't have to obey their pesky laws anymore, in which case you'll definitely be able to name lots of laws you're looking forward to not having to obey anymore, won't you? Yeah, I think we all know how that one ends. So, explain to someone who's been asleep for 10 years why much of the mess we find ourselves in today as a country, up to and including perhaps the swiftness and the ease with which we change Prime Minister now, can be traced back to that referendum result that came in 10 years ago today, but which none of the people who caused it currently see fit to celebrate. Make of that what you will. And then, of course, you have the Daily Express popping up to remind us of the greatest lie of all 10 years in. There is a brilliant Brexit. There is a proper Brexit. There is a different Brexit. It just goes to a different school. So just link the febrile nature of British politics to whatever was unleashed 10 years ago today. OK? 0345 6060 973. And I'll take symptoms or causes, anything you've got, but by way of assembling a tapestry of understanding, so that if you'd fallen asleep on the 22nd of June 2016 and you woke up yesterday and you looked at the state of your country and you said, what, another Prime Minister has gone? What, pogroms on our streets? What, senior politicians responding to a horrible murder by completely ignoring the family of the victim and telling lies about the... OK, what's happened? Draw me a map. Show me you're working. It's 12:22.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I mean, you can look at Germany's economic performances 2016 and correctly and persuasively describe it as worse than ours. And sometimes I hear Brexiters trying to pretend that proves Brexit was a good idea. You won't find anybody in Germany, except whatever the German equivalent of Andrea Leadsom is. You won't find anybody in Germany who thinks things would have been better for them if they hadn't been in the European Union. So it doesn't matter how bad it is, and it is a worse performance than ours for a whole heap of reasons. It would have been even worse if they weren't in the biggest single market on the planet. That's not even an opinion, that's counting. But unfortunately, it was counting in 2016, and many people decided that 2 + 2 = 7. And they're still on the march. They've still got the columns. They're still presenting the programmes that they use to tell you to vote for it and why it was a great idea, when every single thing that they based that ludicrous opinion on has been shown to be false. So how much of the current madness, how much of the current horror, how much of the current malaise can be traced back to Brexit? Andy's in Liverpool. Andy, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Listen, thank you very much for the show. I absolutely adore the show.
Oh,
thank you.
Lovely. Thank you.
Trust me. Thank you. It's the one show that I listen to that I don't scream at the screen. You know what I mean? It's just, it really is. It really is.
That's lovely. Cheers.
I'd just like to say, I am, okay, I'm an older person now.
Right.
I am abhorred by what this country has become because of Brexit. And it really has. It can be traced back to that. I mean, I'm not being funny, right? Yes, there was the National Front. There was all those things going on years gone by. It happened. Yes, we knew it happened. We didn't have England flags sticking on lampposts, or Welsh flags, or Scottish flags, or whatever you might want to call.
Well, except during sporting tournaments.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, it's happening now because people say it's a sports tournament. But these flags have been up for 6 months.
Exactly.
What sports tournament lasts for 6 months, right? Why are we doing this? Why are we allowing this to happen? It's illegal to put on the lampposts, but the local authorities are not taking them down, right?
Because they're frightened.
I've challenged my local authority and said, listen, they need to come down, right? I mean, if somebody's able to go up on a ladder and put them up, then I'm able to go up on a ladder to take them down, right?
Why do you link this to Brexit? Why do you link this to Brexit?
Right. Brexit basically caused the votes, right? Yes, there was
that's true.
Immigration beforehand, but people didn't jump in a boat and come across the channel. It never happened, right? The reason why it didn't happen was because people could come over here on trains, whatever it may be.
We had safe routes, safe and legal routes.
Exactly, right? Now...
It wasn't Brexit that closed that. It was Johnson. We didn't have to close those safe and legal routes. They just chose to, in order to appease the people who voted for Brexit, in order to get rid of all the foreigners.
But the problem you've got is we're putting people through, right? We're putting people like men, women, children through one of the most dangerous waterways in the world, right? We're letting them go across a 20-odd mile stretch of water, which is so busy you can get knocked. You can get hit by
the Faragist would respond by saying that nobody is forcing them to. But just draw me a slightly stronger link between Brexit and all the things that you're describing, because I feel it. I just want to hear it in your words. What was unleashed?
It makes it acceptable for people to be anti-Europe, and it's not even anti-Europe. It's anti-people who don't look like us.
Actually, you don't even need that. It's anti-people.
Well, it's
anti-people. It's not. It doesn't matter whether they look like us or not, because the people that he got cross about at the time, that they all got cross about at the time, did look like us. It was Polish people and Romanian people and French people and Spanish people and European people. That's who they voted to get rid of. And then, of course, all of the vacancies that were left had to be filled by people who, it turned out, didn't look like us. And because it was a much bigger journey to make and a much bigger lifestyle upheaval, they wanted to bring their families with them, and we had to quite rightly let them, because otherwise they wouldn't have come. And that's all on Boris Johnson, and Boris Johnson was a consequence of Brexit. So all of what you describe is a consequence of Brexit. Of course, in a nicer country, then that wouldn't have mattered, because we wouldn't be raging at the fact that there are too many brown and black faces on our television or in our supermarkets, which reminds me actually of Stephen Harrow and that seminal clip from the Brexit years of him complaining or explaining why he voted to leave the European Union because of all the brown people working at his local supermarket. I may play that to you shortly, but I want to leave enough time to play you my conversation with Michel Barnier after the very latest news headlines that are coming up next. But I will leave a little bit of time because it's quite a long conversation, and then we're going to run out, aren't we? So I've got plenty of people waiting to talk about this, but I also kind of focusing on the fact that we've got 4 clips to get through. That's not going to happen. We've got a 15-minute interview with Michel Barnier to get through. That's not going to happen. And we've got Murray and Bob and Leah and Andy and others waiting. Oh, no, we've spoken to Andy and others waiting to talk about how much of the current mess can be traced back to Brexit. And, of course, we've got Amelia Cox with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is very difficult to believe that 10 years ago today, people were insisting that this would be a day of national celebration, that every year the anniversary of our Brexit referendum would be celebrated with dancing in the streets and festivals and enormous parties. Michel Barnier, obviously you were the Commission's chief Brexit negotiator for that sometimes interminable 5-year period, and you are in London for the anniversary. Have you seen any celebrations? Have you witnessed any parties?
No, because I think there is nothing to celebrate, frankly speaking. Nothing. Except perhaps a mutual respect, friendship, and also respect between us. But there is nothing to celebrate, because Brexit remains 10 years after, and even 5 years after, a lose-lose game.
Can you remember your reaction upon hearing the news of what the United Kingdom had done?
Yes, very surprised, as so many people. It was unbelievable, but it was the choice of the UK people. So we have never tried to not respect this sovereign decision. We have regretted this decision, clearly, everybody in Europe, but we have decided to deliver.
And have you come subsequently to a greater understanding of how it happened, when you have perhaps become more familiar with some of the characters that drove the Leave campaign? Does it become clearer to you how the country did such?
Yes, because first of all, during the first sequences of the negotiation, 2016 and 17, waiting for the snap elections in June 17, I tried to understand why 52% of the British people wanted to leave Europe. Why Farage and some others succeeded to use the scapegoat of Brussels to explain all the British difficulties, which is not true. Brussels is not responsible for everything, and the fact is that there is many problems in UK, in France too, and the reason and the solution are not in Brussels for everything.
And Mr. Farage now, of course, is riding high in the polls, despite the, I think, undeniable failure of the Brexit project. Is that a significant factor in how the Commission may view rapprochement? The fact that Farage could be Prime Minister 3-4 years from now, and so anything that we have a new Prime Minister. I'm sure you're aware. This is our 7th since the referendum. But if the prospect of Farage becoming Prime Minister means that any resettlement or renegotiation that the current government undertakes is kind of written in sand.
Let me say just a word about Keir Starmer, because I have a lot of respect for Keir Starmer. We met several times during the negotiation and after, when I was the French Prime Minister 2 years ago. And to be clear, I have no comment to do, but in any case, whatever happened in the future, I wish the best for the UK people and for UK. I don't want to make any speculation what could happen in the next 4 or 5 years in UK. In any case, to create this reset, to build a new spirit between EU and UK will depend on the UK choice. We are open. We are there, and I think it is the common interest. Apart or in addition to the Brexit, which is done, and for us the Brexit is on the book. The point is to know what we can do, what we need to do together for our defense, the stability of the continent, exactly what we've done together to support Ukraine, for the fighting against terrorism, even for cooperation between intelligence services and so on. We have lots to do for our own security and for the stability of the continent, I think, and we are open to work with the UK.
Has Euroscepticism in France diminished substantially as a consequence of looking over the channel?
I don't think so, because in France, the same people, nationalists and populists, use exactly the same argument against Brussels. It is not true. The proof is made in UK that it is not true. It is a lie. Part of the solution are in Brussels, and we need to confirm, to consolidate, to support Europe and to change Europe in the same time, but to remain together, because it is clearly our national interest. It is our national interest to be European, in addition to be patriot.
You've said, to the surprise of some observers, that you could not personally see any obstacle to the UK keeping the pound, staying out of the euro, and also staying out of Schengen in the event of rejoining. I think the Polish Foreign Minister, Radek Sikorski, has disagreed with you on that. Do you stand by your observation?
Yes, and it is my personal view. I think if UK in the future, I don't know, far from now, to rejoin, the door is open, and in that case we will open a new negotiation. But I think we have to take into account the fact that it will be a very exceptional and very particular case. Indeed, the reason why I mentioned these 2 points.
What are your abiding memories of that 5-year negotiation period? What were you most perhaps surprised by?
First, it was long. And in a certain sense, the Brexit has been for me and for many people a school of patience.
Yes.
I've always been very respectful. It was sometimes very difficult to understand the domestic politics and how, for instance, Theresa May and her team failed to reach an agreement on the negotiation at 3 times.
Was it? It was doable, but she couldn't sell it to her own party.
Yes.
Did that surprise you? Did the gulf between the achievable and the political was huge?
Another surprise was the attitude of Johnson and some others fighting against their own prime minister. But I don't want to make any comment on the domestic policy. In France, we have no lessons to give.
Well, your own tenure as prime minister was short enough, I think, to stand comparison with the British model.
To be frank,
for different reasons.
It is one of the lessons of my term as prime minister of France to have a lot of compassion and comprehension towards a prime minister who lost his majority.
Will you run for president, do you think?
The point is not the question is not this one. The question is how we will be able to have one single candidate for the centre right. It is my main goal today. I have no febrility, personal febrility, but to be clear. I just think that to avoid a disaster of a duel at the second round of the presidential election between the far right and the far left. We must be able to have one single candidate, and so I don't tell you who will be this candidate, but I'm working for one single program between the centre and the right, the Republican right. It is my party, and I'm working for one candidate.
Every element of this conversation, which goes back 10 years, is underpinned by instability and disruption in both of our countries. How big a role do you think that Russia has played in that process?
Everybody knows that we face in the daily political life in each of our countries, and it was the case for the referendum in Brexit, it will be the case for many elections everywhere in Europe. We face foreign interferences from Russia, obviously, but also from the United States and for China also. So it's a reason why we need to be strong and to be independent.
Have you been surprised by Donald Trump's conduct in his second term?
Yes, because it is the very, very first time since 60 years that the U.S. president, the president of the United States of America, do not support the European project. The very first time. So we have to accept this new situation and to draw the lesson, which is in any case to be independent, to be able to do for ourselves what nobody will do at our place.
So it could be a blessing in disguise in the long term, because the dependency is over and Europe becomes more self-sufficient.
First of all, do not confound or confuse the current president of the United States with the Americans
country.
And the United States. In any case, Mr. Trump will leave in 2 or 3 years or 4 years, and the United States will still there as ally and friends. So, but in any case, we need to be less dependent for our energy, for our security, for our food. It is the right lesson to draw from the Russian aggression against Ukraine, and also what happened in the Middle East for the moment.
How worried are you for the future and security of Europe?
I'm worried if we are not able to join our efforts to cooperate and to make the financial and technical and military force which are necessary to be independent. My goal is to be able to build a strong European pillar inside the framework of NATO, but we need to be more stronger and more independent.
And finally, Monsieur Barnier, I think that the summit between the EU and between the Commission and the UK will be postponed because of Andy Burnham's arrival in Downing Street. 2 questions. Do you have any personal knowledge of Andy Burnham? And how optimistic can I be as a British Europhile that this resettlement will be substantive and significant?
I don't know personally Andy Burnham, but I am told that he's friendly with Europe, and I think it will be on the same line that Keir Starmer to increase our relation. The point is, we have so many to do together. if it's clear that there will be no cherry picking in the single market. If this clear line is understood by everybody, I think we have lots to do to increase our cooperation for defense, security, and external policy.
Actually, I said one more. One of our front pages today, one of our newspapers, one of the more excitable newspapers, has a front page which says, "Now give us a proper Brexit." So after 10 years, a significant part of our media and our political establishment still believes in a Brexit that I think was always mythical.
I know the argument of the populist and nationalist about the Brexit, but the Brexit has been delivered properly, and it was clear. It was clearly the decision of the UK people and Mr. Farage and his friends to obtain the Brexit, and we have delivered the Brexit, defending in our side the single market.
James O'Brien on LBC.
8 is the time. It was a slightly poignant conversation in many ways, wasn't it? That old line in Rabbie Burns about to see ourselves as others see us. It's quite a gift, isn't it? And it ain't pretty. I just, in the interest of Brexit myths that are still around, I've heard some people claim today that we wouldn't have been able to conduct our COVID-19 vaccine rollout if we hadn't left the European Union. That's a lie. Just so you know, it's a complete lie. There was absolutely nothing about European Union. Well, we were still, I think, technically members at the time, weren't we? But either way, there was absolutely nothing about the European Union membership that legally obliged any members to join the joint procurement scheme. Anyway, back to the glory days. Ashley in Pinner speaks for so many when he insisted in October of 2016 that the main reason to leave the European Union was because of all those pesky laws.
Well, I believe the argument is there's multiple arguments. There's immigration, there's controlled immigration, but again, it's not about I'm not xenophobic. I'm not totally multicultural. I've got a family in America, in Bermuda, in Spain, and
all immigrants.
Immigrants are fine. There's nothing wrong. They're the same as me and you, looking for the best future for their family. But it's not about that. It's about the control. It's about our Prime Minister not having to succumb to the EU, saying that he can or she can't do anything. I mean, it's the fact that we,
And that's fine. I've got no beef with you. If immigration's all you've got, then you're the cliche. You're the walking cliche. But what's interesting, Ashley, and I hope you won't take this the wrong way, what's interesting is that you spend 5 minutes pretending that you've got proper political arguments or economic understanding, and then as all of those claims fall away, you're just left with foreigners.
No, definitely not.
How has immigration damaged your life, would you say, in its current form?
Well, obviously, being a trade, immigration has pulled prices.
No, not for electricians. There's scant evidence that for completely unskilled labour, it might have subjected some wage compression in the care home industry and maybe unskilled labour on working sites. But there's actually a shortage of qualified electricians in this country, which is probably why you've gone self-employed. So it's not that, is it?
Yeah, plasterers, plumbers, electricians.
Yeah, but you're an electrician. I'm asking, all skilled labour is actually a shortage at the moment. That's one of the reasons we can't build as many houses as we need to. So just in terms of Ashley and Pinner and the damage that uncontrolled mass immigration has done to your life, just give me the headlines.
Walking through the city centre and seeing mobs of immigrants not willing to integrate.
Walking through the centre of Pinner and seeing mobs of immigrants not willing to integrate.
Plymouth, down by Cornwall, Plymouth.
Okay.
Not Pinner, but yeah, I mean.
And how do you think leaving the European Union is going to disperse those mobs, Ashley?
I think we'll have more control over how.
But they're already here, mate.
Yeah, but we'll have more control to
No, they're here. So those mobs that upset you so much as you walk through town and see these mobs of immigrants refusing to integrate, now that we're going to leave the European Union, what's going to happen to the mobs?
I believe that we can integrate them because we have the choice and we have the authority to do what we like without.
So when we've you've cast your vote because you don't want these people here in the numbers that they're here in, but you think that by doing that you're going to make them more amenable to integration and friendliness. So you deliver a message to someone saying we don't like you, and you think that makes them more likely to be your friend.
It's not about liking anyone.
You don't like the mobs in the middle of town, do you?
No, and that goes with mobs of Englishmen as well. You know, it doesn't matter on race. It doesn't matter.
So it's got nothing to do with immigration then? It's just mobs you don't like?
Yeah, just don't like mobs.
And bananas?
Yeah.
And all those laws that you can't name?
Bananas, yeah.
Let's just finish with a quick question. When you said it's going to be a short-term economic hit, how long is short-term?
I think it's going to be under 5 years. It's just like starting a new business.
Every single one of your customers is going to be worse off than they needed to be for half a decade, and you're happy with that?
I'm happy, yeah. I'm happy with that.
All right, mate. Let's not fall out. And I hope the business goes, I really do. I hope it booms, even though you voted to have fewer customers and less money in the pockets of the ones you've already got. 12:52 is the time. Of course, Plymouth was indeed the scenes of mob violence after during the Farage riots back in 2024, but I'm not quite sure that was the kind of mob he was complaining about, the ones that were throwing bricks at the police and setting fire to things. And of course, all the faces of the mobs he would have been talking about would have been white, which brings us to Stephen Harrow and a call on the 8th of December 2018.
I live in Harrow.
Yeah.
When I go down to Harrow, and this is not being racist, James, because that term is so easily used and very loosely used. When I go down to Harrow, and I've lived here for 30 years, I walk into Harrow Shopping Centre, and I swear to God, I don't know where I am. I've got Polish, Romanians, Bulgarians sitting outside coffee houses doing sod all day. I've got every nationality under the sun, and it's lost its identity. When I go into Norfolk Park Hospital, and I went in there 3 Sundays ago because I had to go in an emergency, I walked into the accident emergency, as I said to your researcher, 120 people in there. I was lucky if I saw 3 or 4 white faces. It's okay if you live...
Now, that is racist.
No,
that last bit is.
It's realistic.
No, it isn't, because you're forming an opinion of people or their value based on their colour. There are people who don't have white faces who are just as British as you and me, Steve.
Perhaps there are, James, but if...
Well, no, they all are.
You go down
and that's... name me the European Union... Steve, mate, let's not do this. Let's do it nicely. Just tell me the European Union country that is populated by non-white people.
Couldn't tell you.
Well, have a go. Have a little think.
Say the question again?
The European Union countries, because we're talking about your reasons for leaving the European Union, and then you mentioned the fact that there weren't any white people in Norfolk Park Hospital. So which European Union countries are essentially non-white?
Probably none.
So why are you talking about those people then?
All right. Let's backtrack.
Yeah, let's, mate. I'm happy to let you do that.
No, let's backtrack. But it is still a valid point, James.
Not in the context of a conversation about the European Union, Steve.
Yeah,
and I'm afraid that if you are judging people according to their skin colour, then you are, and I say this with love and reluctance, then you are indulging in racial prejudice.
But James is...
so I don't care what colour you are.
Yeah,
I'm never going to say to Beth at the end of the programme, we had too many black people on today, or we had too many white people on today.
But it's not all about white people, white English people. We're going off tangent.
No, you did, mate. I'm just reining you back in again. So crack on.
It's not all about the racist issue. It's just about the fact that the country has lost its identity.
What does that mean?
And that... Well, what does it mean? It means that what I've just said, that...
You've just said that you don't like seeing brown faces at the hospital.
Okay, no. Is it right then, James? Let's give another example. Right? I might be digging myself a big hole, but...
I'll pull you out, mate, I promise.
Right. But the point I'm trying to make, if you went down to my local, and I'll give you an absolute point here, if you went down to my local supermarket, I won't name which one it is, okay?
Yeah.
And one of my sons tried to get a job down, or 2 of my sons tried to get a job down there in a few years when they were in between university and going from college to university. At one point, James, there was 23 tills open, and 22 of them, okay,
yes, mate,
had Indians or Pakistani people.
But we're talking about the European Union, Steve.
Yeah, but what I'm trying to say, James, is this is where it's all coming from. And when I mentioned this to the manager, okay, the manager said to me, we have to reflect the local community. And the point I'm trying to make, James, and you're trying to, to a degree, defend me, but to attack me, is Is that right, James?
Mate,
that is why people have voted out of Europe.
Because we've got too many brown people on the tills in Harrow.
It's not about having too many. But when I was
what is it then, Steve? Just mate, slow down a little bit. Because if you're not complaining about there being too many brown people, why do you keep talking about the number of brown people in the hospital and the number of brown people in the supermarket?
The reason I'm saying that is, James, is because that is why people voted to leave Europe, because of Great Britain.
I don't disagree with you. No, it's not because of Great Britain losing its identity. It's because people are frightened of brown people.
No, it's not about it. No, James.
What difference does it make to me? Just help me out here, because I can kind of get my... just because I work on the phones every day, so I have no idea what colour anybody is. Steve, stop talking. Stop talking just for a moment, my friend, all right? Why does it matter to you what colour the person that you buy your milk off is?
Well, it doesn't matter the colour that the person I buy my milk off, James. But the point I'm trying to make is why people voted out of Europe.
I'm not arguing with you. They voted out of Europe because they think there's too many brown people in their hometowns.
Is it unfair then, James, to say that when I mentioned what I said about the local supermarket, that
and the hospital,
when I'm told, and the hospital, but let's go to the supermarket. When I'm told that we have to reflect the local community, is that not racist, James?
No, Steve. Ah, dear. And there it is. Of course, we've got political parties in which you don't even get disciplined for saying that there are too many brown and black faces on your televisions, in your adverts. That has now become normal, so there's a poignancy to Steve's contribution. Anyway, that's it from me for another day. All that remains is for me to remind you, because we've been celebrating the 10-year anniversary of Brexit. Just one moment, please. Oh, lovely. I'm going to have a pint of champagne now. A pint bottle of champagne. That never happened either, did it? Do you remember when that was all they had? Well, we're going to have pint bottles of champagne. That never happened. That's the ultimate Brexit emblem in many ways. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on our free global player or the LBC app, where you can stay up to date with all the latest news. James O'Brien Daily, of course, podcasts and others available on that app. Download it now for free from your app store. Ben Kentish, lovely to see Ben in the office yesterday, is in for Tom Swarbrick at 4, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.